Plan Commission meeting. It is now called to order. We do in fact have a quorum. First agenda item is approval of the November 10th meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So move.
Is there a second to approve the minutes of the November 10th meeting?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3 on the agenda is the zoning text amendments. And I suppose we should take the zoning map amendments at the same time, or what is your pleasure, Dominic?
Good. Together, but vote separately?
Well, you know, tonight we were expecting to vote on the text amendments and the map amendments, but as it turns out, we are not going to vote tonight. We're going to vote in January, so we'll have plenty of time for discussion and comment and any changes to the text and to the map that we anticipate.
So that suggestion by Commissioner Meyer sounds correct in terms of allowing comment on the text and the map, separating them out as issues to vote on individually. I'm comfortable talking about that. The text amendments, definitely we had more flexibility, and then the map itself, which was approved by the City Council, with one caveat that we'll speak to this evening.
Okay.
Did you renotice this?
Renotice.
Send out notices of the hearing?
We've sent out over 2,500 mailings for the map amendment, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. We did have a...
Within 500 feet of the boundary of the proposed change area, is that the criteria?
Yes, the GIS department here in the city assisted us to compile that, and we also did mailing naturally within the interior, the mailing inside of the downtown area, the notice that the property owner received identified their current zoning district and their proposed zoning district specifically. Staff also put up maps as we could, notices as we could around the downtown area. Unfortunately, some of those get removed, even though it says City of Evanston public notice, but those were our procedures. And it was in the newspaper, yes.
Anything you would like to say before we take questions from the commissioners?
Staff looks forward to your comments to help to improve this document that we've all been working so hard on for a long time.
Okay.
So.
I know Mr. Peters has some questions on the text amendments.
Yes, I'd just like to address the, as you know, we had a great meeting at the last November meeting with a lot of suggestions. Staff sent out a packet with the a first cut agenda, first cut of text amendments last week, the December 3rd draft, and then staff spoke with the legal department to flush out a couple more questions, and that's the results of the draft that says December 8th. We have plenty of copies if members don't have that, but again, all the edits we've made to the previous document that came to the Plan Commission in November are listed on a grid in the back of this document.
Welcome, Mr. Widmeyer.
Thank you.
Mr. Peters?
I have a few questions. Looking at page 5,
It's the same thing that was online, correct?
item A2.
Yeah.
The wording is a little ambiguous, and it can be interpreted to mean matters come to the Plan Commission if the Site Plan and Appearance Review Committee recommend it. otherwise maybe not. And I don't think that's what's intended.
No, it's intended that the Site Plan Appearance Committee will provide a recommendation, a positive or a negative recommendation, and go forward to the Plan Commission, not that the Site Plan Appearance and Review Committee will be the first strainer in effect for that.
So it's probably would be useful to reword that.
We can definitely reword that. This is also, this we're talking about on page 5, 61118A2. This paragraph, this is also one of the places we edited based on recommendations from the previous November hearing where there was a discussion of the appeals process from the Plan Commission. The last two sentences have been added. Decisions where the Plan Commission is the final authority are subject to the Illinois Administrative Review Law. Under that law, an applicant may appeal a decision by the Plan Commission to the Circuit Court. So there was no need for the staff to completely outline a process that's already been outlined, but we did add that.
The copies outside are different than the ones
That's part of
received?
that's part of what we added. We had a lot of
Thanks.
text edits that we needed to make, and then a lot of secondary decisions that we just needed more time to discuss, to be honest. And let me just go through those before we continue questioning. I just explained those. That is one of the main ones, is that we talked about the appeal process, and we added that right there. I think another large aspect that we needed to discuss was in the public benefits bonus section, there was a concern about implementing timeframes, either for the developer to make a payment into a various facade improvement fund, Evanston Sustainable Building Fund, or to complete construction of a plaza that's promised, or a public park. Where relevant, we have added language we've added language that when the city council makes the actual agreement granting these bonuses, that a specific time frame must be included in that bonus. Between staff discussion with the legal department, it was felt that it was good to include the provision that a specific time frame must be agreed upon, but we wanted the city council to have final policy on the flexibility of granting, depending on the economy, depending on the size of the developer, when that time frame must come in. So if we could jump to 61119, and let me just tell you the page number, it'd be far easier.
Page 8.
Oh, okay.
Page 8.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody say ask for J. And if we could continue to page 11, actually. This is where there were changes. We're talking about whole building sustainability. It was a correct edit that was suggested that the letter of credit, the second, the letter of credit here in point 2, we needed to have a time frame. If you look at this last sentence in Roman numeral 2, failure to attain the agreed upon level of sustainability within the time frame agreed upon between the applicant and the city council in the ordinance granting this bonus will result in the city being allowed to draw fully upon the letter of credit. Before, we didn't have any language such to that.
Does that come from legal? Is that a change that legal recommended?
That's, Ken Cox is here to discuss, but that's what I discussed with him, and we suggested putting in a time frame such that with the ability for flexibility for city council to determine what that time frame should be.
Okay.
If we all move to page 13 on inclusionary housing.
Just a question on the sustainability thing. We're saying achieve the required level of sustainability plus 15%. How is the level of sustainability categorized? Is that a lead rating or some other equivalent?
Yes.
Okay.
It is lead.
And what's the plus 15%? How do you categorize that or quantify that if you're a developer or architect, engineer?
Well, it does say in that paragraph, or subparagraph 2, that the amount of financial guarantee must be equal to the extra development and construction costs estimated by the city, plus 15%. I mean, to me, that's pretty clear, but
If I may interject, it's a financial value that we're going to place on the building. So it'd be the cost of the building plus the measures to ensure that is reaches the sustainable level, plus 15%.
I see. Okay.
So if the building costs $1 million, it takes an extra $100,000 to reach LEED Silver. It's 15% of $100,000. That's our total.
Got it. Thank you.
Andrew has something.
do you have any more? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dominic. What page are we on now?
I just want to jump to, as I move the mic so someone can see me, page 13, 3A, where we talked about inclusionary housing. We've added the reference to the inclusionary housing ordinance, Title 5, Chapter 7 of the City Code. Before, we did not have that in there. So that's just for specific points, purposes. Pardon me. If I can move to page 15, where again to talk about the time frame. In section 5A 2, or I'm sorry, 5A3. The last sentence, we talk about applicants who make cash contributions for specific improvements that are to be undertaken by city agencies must enter into an agreement with the city of Evanston and the agency undertaking the improvement that includes a specific time frame for such cash contributions to be completed. Does that satisfy the desire for a time frame?
I think so. Andrew has some comments about time frame.
Okay.
Andrew McGonigal, 2526 Princeton. I'd like to make one comment on this quickly and then make a general comment, if I may. This particular clause doesn't include a penalty, and again, related to probably that 15% and the time frame for that penalty for those contributions for when it kicks in.
What clause are you talking about now?
This is 5A3.
On page 15.
Okay.
Page 15, I'm sorry. It includes a specified time frame for such contributions to be completed. If they're not completed, what are we going to do? Then we've already established a time frame and a penalty. Then that, in my mind, should be consistent throughout the document. So wherever we have a contribution and somebody gains a benefit from it, then if that benefit is realized but not monetarily compensated for in the correct manner, then there should be some recourse.
Let me ask counsel, would that be covered by the general penalty provision in the zoning ordinance?
Ken Cox, City's Law Department. It's understandable to want to include a penalty provision here. The issues, maybe a reference here to a penalty might be appropriate, as the particular penalty might be determined by the City Council when granting or when certifying, that development bonuses are appropriate. The key is that if we were to overly define it here, it may reduce the flexibility to which Dominic referred earlier. One can imagine certain circumstances where a project, the public benefits might be required to be provided before a building permit is ever issued. Some of them may be perhaps not until after the entire project is completed. So to create a specific penalty here may be overly restrictive, but perhaps a reference stating that the agreed upon time frame, the time frame upon which City Council and the developer will agree to must include a penalty should the developer fail to provide the identified public benefits within the time frame specified.
And what we'll see, and I think I like consistency in this. I've added language in edits we'll talk about in the future that says including penalties for noncompliance. Is my error not putting in here, but I agree with that, putting the general language in penalties.
David?
And I assume what you just said more than likely would apply to other sections where a similar benefit is to be accrued given a financial arrangement. Perhaps like the preservation section on the facade, or either a preservation landmark or a facade improvement and so forth, right?
Any benefit that would not be included in the construction of the building itself, and with the exception of sustainability, as that can't be ascertained until after the building is constructed. But for example, on-site or underground parking obviously will be determined well before, obviously by the time the building is constructed. However, anytime when we're talking about donations to a fund, provision of a public benefit off-site, something of that nature, the same kind of penalty language could be included and should be included.
Scott?
In addition to including penalties, we probably need a process for extending deadlines, since occasionally during construction or otherwise, it's impossible to comply with deadlines. And it would be hard for developers and others if they had to get a new ordinance to extend the deadline. So we probably should have maybe a 100-day extension by staff and a further extension by Plan Commission or other appropriate body, because things happen. There are strikes, there are information that can't be obtained, and so on.
I understand the sensitivity to the developer's needs. The most analogous situation that comes to mind is we've had a number of approved plan developments on file that have not begun construction on time. When the developer is aware that the time limit for applying for building permit is impending, they have been able to petition City Council for an extension. And given the fact that City Council would already be agreeing to the timeframes, they would be the appropriate body to request the extension. Also, I should state that in the course of recent events, I don't believe any such extension has been denied. I could be mistaken on that point, but I think Council has proven to be reasonable on this, given the change in the economy and the development market.
Sounds like a good solution. Probably there should be some guidance in the document.
I agree.
Andrew, does that satisfy you?
That's fine. The other initial comment that I've got, and not meaning to steal Dominic's glory, the revised document that is outside, trying to follow that and look at his changes when we have other changes in the previous document that was issued on the 3rd, my preference would be to use the 3rd as the basis and then go through in a logical manner page by page rather than skipping, because I have other comments that precede this, and I'd like them to be taken in context if that's possible.
Dominic?
My thought was just to go over the main, not main changes, but the philosophical changes in terms of time frames and appeals, and I wanted to touch on that, leaving time for our general edits as we go through. I completely understand about wanting to deal with the edits as we go through in a chronological order, but that's what I was just going through in this initial cut and then leaving it open for questions. The other point I'd like to raise, I remember we had this it's just occurred to me, I remember this occurred to us in zoning committee, where we had several meetings and we'd gotten into the very bog of dealing with the language of this, and we had people who wanted to speak who had just shown up, and I don't know how you want to deal with public comment as they sit through, because this is the first time we've sent out mailings for everyone, so there may be some people who aren't aware that we've been working on the zoning implementation for a year, even though we've noticed it in the newspaper, and we've been sending out mailings for zoning committee and everything. Just wanted to raise that point.
That's a good point, and I did ask all of the citizens if they wish to speak to any point that is on the agenda tonight, that they should sign up on the sheet that's out there. No one expressed any interest in doing so. So, apart from Mr. McGonigal, I'm not sure we'll have any public comment.
And staff is available any time during the week to please answer any questions you may have, naturally. But I don't know if that goes back to what you'd like to do. What is the commission feels the best way to review this document?
Why don't you continue on with your overview here, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
On page 19, landmark preservation. (7A3), the last sentence, this is talking about the funds that go into the, page 19, 7A3. And the last sentence of that, further, the applicant and the city council must agree on a time frame for the completion of payments in the ordinance granting this bonus. As we just had a discussion, we will also add language dealing with and appropriate penalties for noncompliance, and also language for necessary extension on that, and come up with some standard language that will be able to apply across all the public benefits in this public benefit bonus section. And the next page, page 20. I'm sorry, 8A, Roman numeral 6. We have applicants who make cash contributions for specific improvements that are to be undertaken by city agencies must enter into an agreement with the city of Evanston. We will again here insert our standard language for penalties and time extension. Public plazas on the next page, page 21. We added a section 10, page 22, 9A, Roman numeral 10. An ordinance granting the specific bonus will include a time frame of completion of promised plazas, including penalties for noncompliance. Staff will add the standard language that we develop in concert with legal. And on page 24, dealing with the facade improvement program, B, Roman numeral 6, staff added, an ordinance granting the specific bonus will include a time frame for completion of donations to the facade improvement fund, including penalties for noncompliance. The language will be standardized, and we will add language regarding the extensions, ability to gain extensions. Beyond that, the edits that were made in the actual districts, the RD, DT, and DC, we removed cultural facility from the RD ground floor permitted uses. On the next page, page 25. Previously, we had ground floor permitted uses. We had cultural facility on the advice, I believe, of Commissioner Galloway, that was removed. Naturally, we had a lot of edits that were oversights that were pointed out in the last meeting, dealing with language, clarity, that we've gone through. I believe we reviewed our notes and put those in there. As this is a document that we've been working on for many years, staff certainly welcomes further comment to improve this document, and it's open and available to questions.
Actually, we've been working on this before you were born. I think we're approaching the 5th year of the downtown plan and the text amendments and so on.
We are looking forward to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and knowing it is not a train, so. I know Mr. McGonigal said he had comments and he had signed up, but.
Okay, is that it right now?
That's the overview
Okay.
I wanted to give, the big points. I didn't think it was necessary to go where we changed 4 to A and.
All right, Scott, do you have something?
I suggest language be added to make it clear that the Planning Commission can recommend bonuses smaller, equal to or smaller than those in the ordinance, and similarly that the council can choose to grant bonuses equal to or smaller, so that it's clear that the bonuses that are listed are not the ones that have to be granted. It could be smaller. I think that's the intent of the ordinance, but it's not clearly stated, or I missed it.
I'm sorry, I may be missing something.
I think the intent of the ordinance is that both the Plan Commission and the council could grant bonuses less than those listed. I think the ones listed are maximums. And that's not so clear. It can be read to mean if they're going to grant a bonus, they have to grant the maximum specified here in the ordinance. But I think that's not the intent.
Maybe legal speak this. My understanding was that the point of, I thought the formulas were kind of specific such that if you met that formula, you were able to ascertain the bonus described. Am I incorrect on that?
I don't want to speak for City Council, but my understanding was that one of the reasons why the proposed downtown plan has such specific bonuses included was to remove the element of relative unpredictability that some folks have leveled at the plan development process, concerned that Project A might offer a certain amount of public benefit and receive zoning relief greater to or less than a project that has very different benefits.
I was not on the commission when they did that consideration. If it's an all or nothing recommendation, that needs to be indicated in the text.
One way or the other, the text should be clear. I think everyone's agreed on that. Ultimately, however, when your recommendations do go to the Planning and Development Committee and the City Council, we'll have that language in there, and they can make a determination as to whether or not there should be an element of discretion or if it should be more automatic as indicated in the text now.
Well, on page 102 of the plan itself, it lists the public benefit features, and then it has a maximum bonus percentage. So I'm assuming, for example, that if you have underground parking, you can grant a maximum bonus of 25%, or 20%, or 15%. But this has to square with the text of the zoning code. Right, Mr. Cox? Okay, so are these two things not compatible?
I apologize, I don't have the entire plan in front of me. You referred to page 102, so I can't refer to that direct text. Thanks, Tom.
Well, it's clear to me from the downtown plan that you do have parameters here. That you don't have to grant the maximum bonus.
If you look at, just for an example, if you look at underground parking, page 10, item B, there's a description on how to grant the bonus based on the number of parking spaces, and loading docks that are fully underground. I believe in every bonus, there's a description on how to grant the bonus. And that, again, that's a way to help signal how much of the public bonus are they actually contributing to the project.
David?
If I understand your question, Scott, it's should there be some leeway granted to a particular applicant who maybe needs 15% of such and such in order to get an FAR bonus, and they have 14.5 or 13, but in any case, my recollection is as legal counsel has stated, that we wanted to have specific numbers so that we would alleviate the nasty stuff that occurred in the plan development ordinance, wherein everything became negotiable regardless of whatever quantities were indicated.
Actually, my question is the flip side of that. It looks to me like these are certainly maximums. Without amending the zoning, they can't grant more. The city council can't grant more, which they could do with the plan development ordinance. The question I was raising is whether they can grant less. And I wasn't sure from the documents.
I don't believe we ever discussed that. In other words, if they need 15% to get a 10% FAR increase and they have 7%, can they get a 5% FAR increase?
I'm thinking if it says they get a 10% increase and the city council looks at the project and decides 10% is too much, it should only be 8. Does the city council have authority to do that without amending it?
That's a different question than I thought you asked.
But aren't there formulas for determining to remove the arbitrariness? There are formulas which mandate what your bonus is. I don't see.
Well, what Scott's saying is we only tell them what the maximum they can get. But supposing
I'm just trying to clarify.
I think he's trying to guard against a developer and a particular project, even though it reaches for the maximum and can get it, still appears egregious, right? And that the council could say, well, regardless of what we've stipulated here, we want to cut it back. I don't think we ever, the only way we covered that contingency was stipulating an absolute maximum, say, height or FAR increase, period, regardless of how many components you brought to it.
I think this.
Understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I think this is a good point, tying in what you stated earlier in terms of working on this for the past 5 years, as I've been here for the last going on 3 years, is that I've heard ever since I've started here that the downtown plan was created to remove the ambiguity of this process, the plan development process. My understanding of the formulas was that it was intended almost to be chemistry in terms you add element X to element Y, and you get such and such bonus, and that's just how it is. So I would be surprised if there were, and legal would speak this, I would be surprised if the city council could grant a lesser bonus without opening themselves up to a lawsuit. If the formula says if you provide 10 spaces, underground spaces, you get 5% up bonus, and the city council then decides to only allow you to have a 3% FAR bonus, when you've met all the standards, that would seem to be contradictory. Or am I not understanding?
I'm comfortable with that approach.
What approach is that?
The one you suggested. Follow the formulas.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure from the text if that was what was mandated for the council and the plan commission.
So what you might be requesting is to make that absolutely clear in the text so that a developer understands that he can't be, should we say, gypped.
Well, a developer and the Plan Commission and the city council members.
I mean, it's very clear on the plan itself. You know, it's quantified in here. There's no debate. But we want to make sure that the text reflects this quantitative approach.
Yeah, it was the
Larry?
intent that they, excuse me, it was the intent that the text referenced the formula. It was the intent, as David said, that it be fairly chemistry-oriented, so that everybody knows going into the initial phase exactly what's possible and what's not. The discretion comes in the willingness to grant that particular bonus or not. And there's nothing in here, obviously, that says a bonus must be granted, but merely applied for and can be granted. But other than that, it was the formula everybody was relying on for the variances.
Sounds
And I
good.
think that, you know, we want to make sure that those formulas become referenceable in here somehow or are part of this.
Let me ask a question about the landmark preservation section.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because there's something you said which I want to make sure I understand. Did you say that your understanding is that these bonuses are what can be granted, but that an authority like city council or plan commission could say, well, we don't want to give it to you?
Yes. Yeah.
That's clearly in the text.
Yes,
Yeah.
very definitely.
Otherwise, there'd be no need for approval, other than to have a hearing where the public can find out what's happening automatically.
In addition to evaluating their application for it and finding it at fault, you're saying that even if their calculations are correct in regards to this bonus, the city still has the authority to decline it?
Yes. The intent of the bonus is twofold, or was when we were developing it. One was to provide those people who were requesting it stability. You know, they're going to put X amount of dollars into preparation of planning and what have you, and they should at least have a very solid idea of what they can request, where they can go with it, how it happens, and not spend 6 months, as we required some before, to spend $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 developing something just to have it fall apart. On the other hand, it was also supposed to be part of the concept that these bonuses meet city needs and requirements of the day, of the time that they're being granted. So these bonuses could change over time. You know, what is used as a bonus mechanism may change over time. So really, you come to the city and you say, I want to fix facades, and they say, well, we don't need any facades fixed today. Then you've got to find something else to provide this bonus, if you will, or this to meet this city need in order to get your bonus. The good news is this is a type of thing that can be determined early in the process, whether that specific type of bonus is available for this particular project or not, and not 6 or 8 months down the road.
David?
Now, the example you cited was one where there simply may not be an available market for the act that would give them the bonus. But supposing that we're not talking about a facade, but we're talking about a design feature of the building which they can accommodate, are you saying that the city then still has the authority to decline that bonus?
For example?
The parking.
Underground parking.
Underground parking for, simple.
Yeah, they can deny it. Obviously, something like underground parking, which we've been pushing so hard for, the likelihood of it being denied is slim. But the intent was any bonus could be denied if it was appropriate, if council felt it was appropriate. That's the flexibility. That's the safeguard built into it.
Well, direct my attention to some language that permits the city council to do that. If in fact they've met the requirements for increased FAR, what is the language that says that the city council doesn't have to honor that?
Well, at one point, and I don't know if it's in here,
And I know
it said council may grant. Now, whether that's here and gone.
Okay, if it says that, then I'm satisfied. But absent that, I think these are pretty absolute
Mr. Cox, do you have a,
terms.
I think it's on page 5, 61118. 5, A1. And it says, all developments requesting public benefits bonuses must be approved by the city council on recommendation of the plan commission. And I think that implies that if the council doesn't approve, then there aren't benefits.
Well, what does that approval entail? Does it mean that that the Plan Commission, for example, has decided that in fact they are eligible for this bonus? Or that,
just like a planned development, we recommend that we recommend these bonuses be approved with this development. That part of it, in a very structured way, is like a planned development, or what the intent was, it would be like a planned development. You've brought your proposal before us. It includes underground parking. It includes public art, for example. And we have taken public testimony, we have looked at it, and we recommend to council that the project be approved with these bonuses, or we recommend to council that the project not be approved, including these bonuses. And then council makes their final decision, as they did in the past. It provides flexibility in exceeding the baseline design height FAR criteria, but it does so in such a way that it also has to meet public needs. I mean, that was the purpose of the whole thing. And not just leave everything wide open for whoever, whatever, wherever.
well, the Plan Commission is the one that decides whether the developer has met certain criteria to be eligible for a bonus. We decide that.
To be eligible.
Yeah,
Not to be granted.
whether in fact they have put in underground parking.
Yeah, I mean, to
and
be
met
eligible, but
certain
not to be granted.
But we,
To recommend that, yes, they're eligible, to recommend, yes, we think this project deserves. It all makes sense to the Plan Commission, and so we recommend.
But can we say, Mr. Developer, we don't want underground parking here?
Well, we can say that we are going to pass on to council a recommendation not to include providing you the bonus for underground parking. That's within the purview of the Plan Commission.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm sort of, yes, Dominic.
I'm just trying to clarify my understanding. I also staff the Zoning Board of Appeals, and for them, Zoning Board of Appeals, when they have a case, they grant a variance based on whether that project meets all of these standards that are outlined. My understanding of this, and I think underground parking is a good example, unlike facade improvements, which could have some, you could say it does or does not meet as tight as we try to make those standards. But in terms of underground parking, if somebody were to come before this board and say, I'm going to put these spaces entirely a full level below grade, I'm going to put the loading spaces, is going to comply with all city size, dimension requirements, and the entrance and the exits to the parking garage or loading dock will be located off an alley. I can assure you that. And the design of the garage will be compatible with the facade treatment of the rest of the building. It's still, the Plan Commission, if they were to negatively recommend, wouldn't they have to recommend based on that they didn't meet one of these standards, or am I incorrect on that?
No.
Okay.
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct that they don't meet, that's true. I mean, that's been true of planned developments and everything else.
Okay.
That never changes. It's just that there's the flexibility to say, we don't believe the way you're doing it meets the standards, and therefore we don't recommend it. Or, yes, it does meet the standards, and therefore we do recommend it.
Okay.
Can we say that they do meet the standards, but we still don't recommend it?
You're a lawyer.
Well, I mean, we're getting into a little
That would
esoteric.
that would be a little more difficult, I
But
think.
isn't that what you're saying, that the council still has the authority not to recommend something, not to approve something, even though they have met these standards?
The variation requirement that was just described comes out of the case law, not the statute, and not the ordinance. There isn't similar case law for bonuses like this. I read this to say they could meet the standards and not get approval, and that the council has discretion. But it's certainly not altogether clear.
You see, that was never my understanding. My
That would seem to
understanding
put-
was that if a developer came in here and met certain requirements, they get a bonus, end of story.
To remove the ambiguity from the process.
Yes, to eliminate ambiguity and to eliminate discretion.
I think if you look at underground parking, it's that's pretty much a cut and dried example. It's very hard if they provide underground parking and meet all the standards for underground parking to deny it. First of all, we wouldn't want to. But if you start talking about facade improvement or some of the more artistic provisions, they're more subjective provisions, that's where you become, is this really a facade improvement that's going to improve a facade in some building and to give you the bonus, or is this just something that was thrown in that we don't really think meets all of the objectives of a facade improvement?
Well, that's where discretion comes in.
That's where discretion comes in.
Underground parking is a
Underground
much more
parking.
difficult.
We go out and beg for it. It's hard to say no when we beg everybody to put it in.
Lenny?
Where in the proposed text amendment does it say that the Plan Commission shall recommend that the benefit be, or that the bonus be conferred if the public, if any or all of the public benefit features have been established? Where does it say that they shall do that? Because if it doesn't say that they shall do it, then I think we're limited to the language. And I think that that's the explanation as to why we have the discretion. Also, I think that the wording in and of itself, being in meeting and eligibility, unlike other aspects of the zoning ordinance, it's not an as of right type of entitlement. So to the extent that our discussion is, do we have the discretion, if the word shall doesn't appear anywhere in there, mandating that we do something, then we do have the discretion. But also, to the extent that we exercise our discretion, I'm fairly certain that the ordinance provides that our recommendation can be overcome by a vote of whatever percentage of the city council. So if we were to exercise our discretion in such a way that the city council doesn't agree, I think that they would be able to exercise their discretion to overrule our recommendation. At least that's my understanding on how the zoning ordinance does work. So,
Let me ask the other, I think we've seen three lawyers give three different interpretations.
Something new?
So,
Nothing new.
Yeah, what's new about that one?
I urge Mr. Cox or others in his department to clarify this issue. But let me ask the other commissioners, what's your view on the correct policy?
What's our
As a
reflection on the intent?
As non-lawyers?
Not intent, but as people concerned with the physical development in Evanston. what's a better policy here?
I think the discretionary authority is a good idea. While I can't think of too many,
While I can't think of too many examples offhand where underground parking, if someone brought a design to us with underground parking, where we would want to decline the benefit from it, I'm certain, given past experience, that there probably is a condition out there where we would want to do that. So if I was to err on one side or the other, I would make it perfectly clear that these bonuses are specifically defined as best we can, but nevertheless, they are discretionary, given the lack of that wonderful word "shall."
Look at the title. It's Public Benefits Bonus. The intent is that it benefits the public, and as a reward, allows the developer to recover the cost of providing this, plus maybe some profit, we hope, by building a little bit denser or higher building. So in any of these cases, one of the questions that should always arise and always be asked is this proposal, are these bonuses requested in this proposal a public benefit or perceived as a benefit to the public? If they are, and they meet the other criteria, then they should be granted. And that was the intent in the first place. If they are not considered a public bonus, then the discretion of the Plan Commission in recommending and the council in granting steps in and may deny it. That was the intent, and I still think that's what we're trying to achieve with this, to get away from, the total melees that we had in the plan development era.
Lenny?
I agree with Mr. Widmer, because in addition to that, the public benefits will come down to our proper exercise of our discretion, which I think everybody presumes that we're going to do. But also, the public benefits may change depending on the circumstances that we have in our own environment. For example, something unlikely would occur, but could remove, for example, a component for parking or whatever. These are things that we are looking at now as being a benefit to us. There may be things on here that become less of a benefit, maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 years, who knows why, but they may become less of a benefit, and there actually may things that arise become a benefit that we may have to go back and add on here that are unforeseen at the moment. So I do concur to the extent that the general principle of us being able to exercise our discretion.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think that, in addition to what's been said about the discretion, I think that not only applies to the standards, but it also applies to the potential incentives. If there's a particular case, maybe historic preservation, for example, of a particular building that we want to preserve, does the Plan Commission have any sort of authority to recommend to council to give more of a bonus than what's allowed, for example?
I don't think so.
I think we get into real murky waters if we go down that road, frankly, but...
If we agree with Mr. Widmeyer's suggestion, then there should be an additional standard to the effect that the public benefit is sufficient to justify the bonus. And then that gives the commission and the council clearly the discretion to make that judgment and weigh the advantages and disadvantages.
I believe in all the development that was the intent.
So I'd recommend that be added as a standard.
So, Mr. Cox, you want to dress that up a little bit. And, you don't have to do it right now, but I know you've
I
got a lot to
appreciate that.
think about here.
No, Chairman Updike, I'm grateful for the fact that you said that no vote would be impending. The city's law department will look into the issue. I think all points are well taken from the members of the commission. However, I think it is just interesting that this late in the game, there appears to be a difference of opinion among the members as to what the particular intent of the plan was. We'll try to narrow this down and come up with alternate options. And ultimately, there obviously will be a recommendation from the commission, but council will have final authority as to how they want to enact the particular zoning amendments that will proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Marino, you've been sitting back there very quiet, and I'm wondering if you have anything to add to this, because you were a principal member of the Downtown Plan Subcommittee, and can you shed any light on what we've been discussing?
I'll try. I've been fascinated by the discussion. My recollection in terms of the intent during the planning process was more to apply formulas that would be relatively strict. I think the underground parking is the best example because it's either there or it's not. I think when you get into issues like facade or some of the other issues that I think staff has worked hard to try and define precisely, but still can be a bit nebulous, that's where you want to have both this body and council have discretion, certainly, in terms of interpretation and judgment. I think one of the discussions about intent for a public hearing process when the plan was being developed was that you still wanted to have a public hearing at the Plan Commission level, but the purpose of the public hearing was to confirm that the standard really had been met per the formula. And so I hear a plurality of opinion on this issue, which there certainly may have been debates that might have reflected the discussion we're having tonight, might have been debates during the planning process. But I do, I think Dominic used the word chemistry, and that's my recollection, that this was intended to be more of a formula, and then to make sure both at the commission level and the council level there was sufficient public notice, public hearing, and ample discussion and confirmation that the standard was really met. I think, obviously, your discussions have evolved in zoning committee since the planning process, and I think there you put some thresholds on certain properties of certain height and scale that you want to be treated somewhat differently, and that's understandable, and that's likely to be received well. Can't say for sure, I don't want to speak for council, but received well at the next level. But I'm a little concerned that I don't want to see us return to the plan development process where it was way too nebulous, very well intentioned, and we had a number of good products come out of that plan development process in terms of built environment. But I think I'm a little concerned if we drift too far away from the formula approach, because both our consultants and staff and the commissioners present at that time seemed to feel that, and the city manager at that time felt very importantly, that that was a way to go to make things more precise, less nebulous, more predictable, most importantly for the residents and other property owners, but also for the development community.
Thank you. Scott?
I hope when this goes to council that someone briefs them on this issue so they can specifically address it and decide how much to limit their own discretion.
I must say, Dennis, that you have articulated exactly what I have all along thought the intention was, and I see that the function of the Plan Commission is to decide through hearing whether the standards have been met, and that's kind of it. But David, do you want to add to that? I know there's some discretion when it comes to facades and other things like that, but underground parking is pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, well, I have somewhat ambiguous feelings about that. My recollection, I do remember a number of discussions about the safety and the comfort and the expeditiousness of the formula. Nevertheless, as I was reading through this over the last couple of days, when I came to certain topics like facade renovation for a bonus, or preservation as a bonus, or even the plaza as a bonus, and then trying to understand the criteria of evaluation, my head just started spinning. Regardless, in my opinion right now, or my feelings right now, are that even if we were to be able to write language which qualifies those criteria more specifically, which I don't think we can, quite frankly, I would be inclined to have us given some discretionary authority in the acceptance of those kinds of bonuses. And as I was thinking about underground parking, which is the be-all and end-all, the godsend of all development here in town, despite the fact that we have a high water table, or maybe because we have a high water table, is there some circumstance where a developer comes in and says, okay, I'm going to go down 2 floors, and I've met the criteria, here are the calculations, and here's my FIR increase, give it to me. When our city engineer knows, or to the best extent that he can know, that that structure is going to be jeopardized by virtue of water pressure, or maybe it interrupts an aquifer or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of things that might come down the pike. And in that regard, I guess I'm a bit reticent to grant these things, automatically.
Well, isn't it likely that a question like that would be decided by city engineers well before it got to the Plan Commission?
But I don't know, being the devil's advocate, who's to say that the developer says, well, you're wrong, we're meeting the criteria, we're going to fortify the concrete walls and waterproof the bejesus out of it. But of course, we all know that they're going to be gone from a development, in a very short period of time, certainly gone by the time anything fails.
So what you're saying is that the council should retain discretion in all of these public bonus issues.
Well, that's sort of where I'm leaning tonight.
And I thought we were
But
trying
that's
to get
tonight.
away from that. Yeah, okay.
Chairman update, can I?
Andrew?
I've listened to all of you with great interest.
Maybe amusement.
I didn't laugh during any of it. But I actually have a precursor question that David and you have sort of alluded to. And knowing how developers work, the developer comes up with an idea, he formulates it, he looks at the regulations, he may employ an architect, he may start doing all of his fundamentals to see if he can get his numbers right. And there's a point whereby he's not ready to come before this committee for approval, or the city council. And he doesn't want individuals to actually know what he's thinking. He's at a point of trying to formulate how he can achieve a result. And at that point, he's either talking to the city manager or he's talking to Dominic, the zoning administrator, or Dennis. And he comes up and he says, to make this work, I need to have an increase in FAR, and I think I can achieve it by A, B, and C. So at which point he goes out and he spends $200,000 on hiring architects to produce a variety of schemes to actually produce it. So he's actually out there putting out money. So the question, that my precursor question is, what leeway, what authority does the zoning staff actually have with this document to actually enter into a negotiation with a developer that will go so far down the road, and either it works or it doesn't work, or he comes before you and you all say, this doesn't work, go away. Or you've approved it and it goes to City Council and they say, go away. I mean, we've set all these guidelines, we've set all the formula, but there's a piece missing before the equation, which isn't covered in this document anywhere, as to how this is interpreted and relayed or convinced or put out there to these individuals that are potentially trying to improve our environment. And that worries me a little, because I'm not quite sure, and I'm sure Dominic's sitting there going, I don't want to tell Mr. B or Mr. C that he can have these because this says it's there. And then he gets in front of you guys and you go, well, no, we don't want that. So I think that's a question that none of us have ever addressed. And that gives me a lot of concern.
Todd, did you have something? Is your light on? I don't know if that's yours.
It is. I had other comments, but we're on this topic now,
Okay.
So we can continue on that topic. I had a similar response as I was listening to the comments as well, and I would agree with you. I think that the main goal here, I think in all of our minds, is to make development in Evanston an easy and clear and precise process. As Dennis was mentioning, that was the whole point of getting away from the PD process and replacing this language so that we can make it clear for everyone what to expect. But at the same time, I would personally like to make sure that we're not discouraging or dissuading development, particularly downtown. And I think that's the underlying point of where you're coming from.
Right. I don't want to dissuade anybody. In fact, I want to encourage it, and I want it to be for the better and the benefit of the people of Evanston. But I don't want somebody to put out a lot of money to then be embarrassed and upset that we as a city have discouraged them. But I also don't want to give the print boy the authority to approve, a 20-story high-rise when he doesn't have that authority. So I'm torn as to how you communicate this document in a manner that is seen as a guide rather than absolute. And that comes back to the discretion of the City Council, shall or will, or this commission, shall or will or may. So in my mind, that all dovetails together. And Dennis is right. We want a document, and we've all been through the process, that we want to make it easier, and we want to make it so that the residents of the city of Evanston know what it is they're getting and what their exposure is.
I would agree, and I think Commissioner Galloway was mentioning before as well that what we're trying to do is exactly what you're saying. Have a document where all parties concerned, the public, the city, and the development community are on the same page. I guess my comment to that is that I agree with the comments I think Lenny and others have made before about the art of negotiation. I mean, all of these deals that are done come down to, negotiating between the parties that are involved, and I think that we have to maintain some level of flexibility and negotiation in all of these things, because if developer X comes to the city and says, well, I have something that isn't in your list that could be considered a public benefit, should we not consider that for the benefit of the city?
I actually thought about putting a category in there to be determined, and maybe put a maximum of 15%, which was way below the maximum of any of the other items. And then that gave you some flexibility, that it gave you the ability to be in that negotiation point. I'm not quite sure whether that actually leads us into a greater quagmire than the one that we were already in and trying to get out of. So I'm really torn with that as a concept.
Pause there for a moment. David, or Larry, Larry?
I understand what you're saying, but obviously the only way you can provide a developer with an absolute roadmap is saying everything is just by the basic by right formula, and that's it. The minute you start providing opportunities, there's always the chance that something will be accepted or not. Now, interestingly enough, what we've done here is just limit the variety of things you can come and talk about. So we're not opening negotiations of everything. There are 8 or 9 things, and you can talk to staff to begin with about that. But in my experience in the last 9 years, most of the projects, most of the aspects of projects, maybe all, that were rejected at this level and the council level, when they went to Spark said, that's not going to work. So I've found that staff has had a very keen sense of what the commission and what the council is looking for in a specific area in a specific point in time. So I think your concern in reality is probably an over-concern, because I think unless something just comes out of the blue, staff has a pretty good idea what will fly and what won't fly, and what the city's looking for and what it's not looking for. And I think your developer is going to get some good advice. I think because things are narrow, because things are specific, it's going to be maybe easier for them to take advice rather than saying, well, I'll just go fight it here and I'll fight it there and thinking I'll win somewhere down the road, which is what happened and where developers really lost out. They took that attitude out of Spark and just ran with it until they were shot down.
David? Yeah, I know. I'm going to get that.
Andrew, your suggestion of another category sort of reminds me of one of the lead point benefits, the category of innovation, where you can get certain points if you provide a product that does certain generally described things that haven't been covered in other categories. As much as that's intellectually sort of appeals to me, I'm a little frightened to go there, given that it's the first toe in the pond of the tsunami that we experience with planned unit developments, where
as you recall, I always said I was hesitant.
Yes, yeah.
and I share your concern. I'd rather keep it narrow, I think. But Larry's point about, the ability and knowledge of staff, I think is well taken. But it's, I say, something I think that needed to be flushed out and talked about. And I don't know if other people have other opinions that want to be aired on that subject.
Well, the primary impetus for all of this was to prevent some of the egregious and totally unpredictable behemoths that have occurred in town. And
Now, Dave. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
not necessarily in my opinion, but in the opinion of others. It was, as well as to provide a formula to developers to be fair to them and say, look, this is a relatively predictable scenario for you when you come to town, to what you can get.
Right, but that comes back to the words that we've been debating: shall, may, or will. And the question is, which of those words do you want to insert into the document? Because each of them have a different legal binding. That may be city council, or it may be general council that makes that final determination. I think it's your position to actually, from the way I'm looking at it, to give your recommendation to general council as to which of those three words should be the guidance for which you would like to be followed.
Well, given the importance of that, it's a blessing that we aren't going to be taking a vote tonight, because I would very much like to get the opinion of Jim Woods on this, who has, been intimately involved in this entire process, and other commissioners as well as anything from staff and legal.
Lenny, you had something?
Yes. Just a comment on, is it Mr.
Andrew.
Andrew
McGonigal, Mr. Andrew McGonigal.
McGonigal? And I'll keep this under 45 seconds. I just want to, I share Mr. Widmer's comment. Your question dealt with the reliability and the predictability of the process, if I understood your question correctly. Well, I think that this body has a duty to fulfill. Otherwise, there'd be no point for us to be here. We have to exercise our discretion in such a way that if this particular commission develops a reputation for not approving or not recommending plans in the type of hypothetical that you gave, word will quickly travel around. I'm fairly certain that the body has a reputation through communications between a developer and staff at the early stages whether or not something has a reasonable probability of being approved. So if we start to act in a way that is abusive of our discretion, then it's going to be to the detriment to all of us. So I think that there's always going to be a certain level of, nothing is 100% certain. But I completely understand and appreciate your comment. I just think that to some extent there has to be some faith in the commission to do what they're asked to do. Otherwise, this room will be full and we'll hear about it.
I've actually been through this process all the way through, so I've seen various commissioners, and I've dealt with them on a regular basis outside of this as well. So I have great faith in their charge and in how they carry it out. And I, too, have a desire to see the process improved and made simpler. I don't think any of you would abuse the position of power that you're in, and that is not my intent to put that as a guiding light. But it still comes down to those three words. And you, as a commission, make that recommendation to council, to the document, as to which you feel is correct for improving the quality of that process. And I know you gentlemen will do the right thing.
And we can, I think we can only exercise the power that's given to us. So if legal counsel or if city council says shall, will, or may, we're limited, I think, to what we are instructed to do. So whatever it turns out to be, we will operate and live under that. So, yeah.
Todd?
I just had a few comments and questions on the text, if this is an appropriate time
Okay,
to...
are we sort of, David, you want to beat the horse a little further?
I'm not quite ready to bequeath what course we take to legal. We've spent a lot of time writing this ordinance. We should be the authority that decides which of those three words or what we want to imply or decree ourselves.
I think it's vitally important that we get guidance on that, because whatever our opinion, you will be directing us to write this. I just want to say that in the zoning code for standards for variations, it says zoning administrator for minor variances, zoning board of appeals for major variances may approve such variation only upon finding that the application complies with the separate standards for each type of variation. So we're using may in this, but each time we go through the zoning board of appeals, the chairman, Robert Creamer, if he was here, would tell you that we go through each variation, each standard specifically. As an example, last night we had a case where there was a disagreement on how that standard was applied, and that's the discretion, I think, that comes in by using these standards. And I think it's very important that I've had drilled in that this was to take the ambiguity out as much as it could. But yet, it's the responsibility of the Plan Commission to make sure that those standards are applied. For ones that have concrete numbers, it's not that hard. For something such as facade improvement, where it says the storefront or street-facing side of the building must be designed when appropriate, that's a lot of discretion. But I think the numbers hold that if they meet the numbers, that if they meet the underground parking, or if they meet affordable office space, they come in, I'm giving you this much B and C class office space. The bonus says I've given this. I just don't see how that could be not approved, because it's a formula right there.
I agree with that. I agree with that, with affordable office space and parking, but there are some that...
Right, and that's your discretion.
Right.
And that's where I think where Commissioner Asaro comes in. That's your responsibility, right?
There are analogous issues. There are analogous issues that come up in zoning matters. Vested rights comes to mind, where you leave discretion with the council for long periods, or you take it away. So Andrew told the story of the problem when you leave discretion. But there are also problems where you take away discretion and a proposal comes to the council which meets the requirements, but it's bad for the city. And I don't think there is a right answer, but I think we need some clarity.
Okay. I think the question is,
Right now, we use maybe. I mean, in all of these, if you look at it, it says that a bonus may be approved.
I think that's what it means, is not shall. In the variance area, the courts have given different interpretations. I have another question about what this means. Landmark preservation. Do the bonuses, are the bonuses limited to the same building that's the subject of the preservation? Or by preserving building A, do you get a bonus which you can take to a different location for building B? And I don't know the answer. Maybe it's there and I didn't see it.
That was my understanding.
It's transferable.
Yeah, that if your project is building A, and you propose to restore a landmark B someplace else, not on that same site, let's say, that your building A gets the benefit. That's my recollection, and if anyone has any others.
If that's the interpretation, we probably need that in the text.
I think it's kind of, and it's certainly in planning, when it says a property owner of the landmark building receiving the funds must enter into agreement with preservation regarding the manner in which. So if funds are being transferred, it at least implies that it's probably a different building.
We can
Or
make
could
it
be a different building.
There's an ambiguity about what funds are being, what the funds are. And
we can remove that ambiguity with language.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner, you had.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, and you'll maybe have to bear with me and provide a little patience. I'm not trying to test Mr. Marino's patience here, since he's been, and all of you have been involved in the downtown plan for quite some time now. I just had a few questions and comments about the general text. We've been spending a lot of time on the bonus part of this, but if we could back up a little bit and talk just about, the architectural review, the design review of these projects as they are put forth, before not only staff but the commission and city council. How is that portion handled?
Are you speaking on a specific page, sir?
I was just looking initially at the general provisions, and we talk about land use and accessory uses and signs and parking and whatnot, but we don't specifically mention what is the process by which these projects are actually reviewed from a design capacity.
You're asking about the ones that don't come to the commission?
Right.
And don't come to council?
I think if we look on page 6 of the December 8th document, and we're looking at standards, letter E. That's talking about where the Plan Commission has input of buildings that come before it. I think, as you'll see through discussion, number 5, point 5 on page 7 says development meets the standards and is consistent with the guidelines of the downtown design standards and guidelines.
Okay, so this presupposes that the developments are already meeting those standards and guidelines.
When they apply, they're going to be given that design standards and guidelines for their development, so that it will be reviewed against that, just so that they can make sure that they're meeting that in the downtown area. Am I correct on
And
that?
what are the? I guess the question is, what are the teeth behind that? The standards and guidelines are there to make suggestions, but what sort of review capacity or what kind of standard are we actually holding these people to? I mean, we can't necessarily demand that they meet
the question is about
guidelines, right?
the proposals that don't come before the commission. So they were proposals without public benefits, proposals that don't have a height of 110 feet or more, just have a staff review.
Correct.
But they would go to site plan and appearance review.
It would seem to me that it's like anything else of that variety, you have to meet those standards to be given a building permit.
Yeah, there is going to be.
I have to remind you that there is a representative from the Plan Commission that sits on Site Plan Appearance and Review Committee. So anything that does not qualify to come to Plan Commission, there at least is representation at those meetings.
Okay.
But it's a good point you go to about teeth. We're always trying to work on the hammer in let's see, gentle nudging we're trying to get to, and it's always been something we've been working with to further here in the city with design standards and guidelines, so, and with the corresponding standards that we can then enforce, so
Right.
that we can fall back upon.
And I know the city has a long history of, debating these things and making sure that, we have what's right or what we believe is appropriate, an appropriate addition. On page 4 of the off-street parking and loading, it's maybe a question that's been debated quite a bit already, but I'm just wondering, we're saying, we're requiring off-street parking and loading, and I'm wondering, other cities, including the city of Chicago, have gone to, not requiring any off-street parking, for example, to encourage transit use, to encourage density and more, sort of transit-oriented development. I'm just wondering, are we sure that we're not, sort of incentivizing a non-urban kind of development pattern here by, my concern is, are we encouraging surface parking lots, for example, in the downtown core, where that's clearly what I don't think any of us want to see?
One thing we have done in the various sections is to take out, we've made public garages a special use in that, but I was wondering if one of the members who was here for the creation of the plan could speak to this provision in this.
Which provision are we talking about?
6-11, page 4, the off-street parking and loading.
If I could comment, certainly during the planning process, when it was reviewed at Plan Commission and Planning Development Committee, there was discussion of off-street parking requirements. There generally was not agreement as to whether or not they should be reduced. I think there was recognition that in some cases the required parking that was built in certain developments was not being used in its entirety. But on the other hand, there were members of Planning and Development Committee who felt in their neighborhood, I mean, adjacent to the downtown, that there was a greater need for parking. So it really varied. There was a lot of debate, and there was really not consensus. There's certainly not sufficient consensus to reduce the parking requirements in the downtown, although a number of developers certainly made the argument that in their development more people were using transit. They had one car instead of two cars, those kinds of issues. So, you know, that's been debated a couple times.
We've run, in the last 9 years, I think, 2 different parking studies. And in both cases, one was done privately, one was done through the city staff. And in both cases, we found that there, and I forget exactly what the numbers were, but that the number of cars owned by residents of multifamily housing in Evanston stayed pretty true whether they were downtown or whether they were not downtown. The difference may be people downtown don't drive their cars much, but the people who live in Evanston go to Old Orchard. They're not the same as people who live in downtown Chicago. They don't have cruising taxis, for example, things of that nature. So every time we discuss this, and I know, you know, we also looked at things like trying to get more shared cars over time. But at this point in time, it appeared that every time we looked at it and every time they studied it, the number of cars that people who lived here didn't, we weren't seeing people moving in without cars to speak of. Unlike we might see in Chicago if you're, you know, near North or near West Side or something like that. And that's why at that time, as you said, there was a lot of back and forth with some developers who would.
So
we also found the developers were were going out and taking surveys at times when most people, where there were at least an expected percentage of their residents wouldn't be there, and then saying, gee, those spaces aren't being used.
To add to that point of compromise, if you look at things like the residential use requirement in all other zoning codes that require parking for residential uses, it's about number of bedrooms and not the square footage size. And here we're calculating by square footage, so it's an actual, in some cases, reduction in the spaces, because you could have a 2-bedroom that is 800 square feet, potentially. The reduction for car sharing, reduction for ground floor off-street parking requirements, there's general reductions overall, yet it still allows for, we still require that parking. So I think it balances both of those issues of we're not really necessarily creating surface parking lots, but we're also providing provision that allows to ensure that we have some off-street parking.
The other one was on page 11, which was the whole building sustainability. And I just wondered if there had been any discussion or consideration of, let's call it beyond the building, or beyond the building envelope, let's call it, for green infrastructure, specifically, you know, alternative stormwater management, any incentive for permeable pavers or rain gardens, recharge beds, et cetera. If there was any provision for incentive for, you know, alternative energy use in terms of, you know, solar-powered streetlights as it related to the streetscaping or parking meters, trash receptacles, et cetera. Is it appropriate to be expanding this section a little bit to include the public realm or the non-building areas, I guess is the question.
Well, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but with LEED certification, don't they take some of those into account already?
Some of it
with the
does, yeah,
building.
for the site, some of the site issues, yes, that's
Right.
true. But that is within the private parcel as opposed to the public right-of-way in terms of public streetscape or public plaza area.
But it's
from what
also
I understand.
defined on what the developer may put into their realm of what's being affected. So if they're looking at drainage that will connect into the public sidewalk that they're having to improve anyways.
True.
LEED would look at that as a credit towards that building's drainage system as well. So at this time, unless we want to start looking at LEED ND certification, which just got approved in October and is just now an accreditation, I think leaving that out of here until that fleshes out a little bit more might be sufficient.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, should we not be considering LEED ND as a part of, if we're considering LEED Gold and LEED Platinum and Silver and whatever for buildings, I mean, should we be considering LEED ND for? Particularly for the downtown district, because to meet LEED ND, you need a certain number of dwelling units per acre. LEED ND is specifically oriented towards, high-density urban areas, so.
I would prefer at one time that we certify the entire downtown as LEED ND. One singular building being developed wouldn't necessarily potentially qualify for LEED neighborhood design, because they're going to look at street connections, block grid, et cetera.
Yeah, true. Number of intersections per acre and other issues, yeah. The other one was on page 17, the above-grade parking concealed by the habitable floor space.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Please, go ahead.
I think the point that Todd just made in your comments in regards to that, I think are very apt. An awful lot has happened in regards to sustainable developments and the creation of an ND category, which, while it might have been foreseen when we started this process, was certainly not part of any discussion. So if there is anything that we should do, or it would be advisable for us to do in modifying this document to take into account those things which we know are coming down the pike, and those things which we know, at least I believe, are going to be incorporated into our comprehensive general plan as far as sustainability goals, it might be worth including in here.
I guess that was sort of, I agree with Commissioner Galloway, that LEED ND, your point's well taken, Craig, that's really more for a district or a neighborhood corridor, that sort of scale, as opposed to a parcel by parcel development or individual building project. But what if someone comes in with a net zero building or a net positive building that are there any? I just keep coming back to are there any other incentives or things that we're not providing for here? And that goes back to the discretion comment. So I don't want to rehash that again, but
just one comment to that. If you do look at the end of the whole building sustainability, item B2, commitment to LEED Platinum or city administered equivalent sustainable rating, 15% increase in FAR, higher bonus up to the max of 25, I think it's 20 or 25%, may be awarded to projects that exceed minimum certification levels.
Right.
Platinum and above, if we have an energy positive building going into downtown Evanston, I would hope that we would look at granting them the maximum FAR.
Right, okay, great.
Good point, thanks, Craig.
I have a general question. How far can we go with substantive changes from the, well, I mean, we do have a downtown plan here that's been accepted, and I'm wondering how far we can go with substantive changes. I mean, what we've been talking about, a lot of typos and few little technical things, but what I think Todd was suggesting is a substantive addition here. And are we permitted to do that at this stage?
I thought you were the plantation owner. I mean, isn't that your purview, our purview, or no? Is it? Yeah, I don't want to suggest things that aren't.
No, I mean, I think it's an excellent idea. May we entertain substantive changes?
I think you can. I think the plan is very much a set of policies. It's more than that. It's a strategic plan, the downtown plan. I think in terms of being reasonably consistent with those policies makes sense in terms of your recommendations now on the zoning. Adding things that weren't discussed before or hadn't sufficiently evolved, as long as they're consistent, reasonably consistent with the framework of the plan, I think that's fine. And I think that's a better product because of what you're doing now.
I like the phrase reasonably consistent. Okay, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied.
Page 17, the above-grade parking concealed, letter, Roman numeral IA, and then Roman numeral 1 there. It says that must meet all applicable design standards, and I'm just wondering what standards that's referring to. Perhaps we need to specify what that is. In Roman numeral 2, we talk about structures being separated from a public street, by the alternative or the other uses there. I'm wondering, I'm assuming that the building code already would apply some sort of fire separation between those uses, and we don't need to include that here.
You're correct. Well, any building that's going to get reviewed is going to get reviewed by fire and building code per se. If it doesn't meet this, it's not going forward.
Correct. And just a question of where the minimum depth of the 20-foot came from, because that's not much to do anything in terms of, if you think about a standard retail depth of, say, 65 feet or something. I mean, what do we think we're going to get, I guess, in a 20-foot depth, other than maybe an ATM lobby or something like that? Is that enough, I guess? Is the 20-foot minimum enough?
David?
We did discuss that at length, and I think 20 feet was determined to be adequate in upper floors.
That's my recollection, that there's been a pretty thorough discussion of that. I can't recall the rationale. I just know it's something that's been discussed.
So do we need
to do any more would have, as I recall, to do anything deeper would probably restrict the viability of any parking being there at all, and to go any narrower would create a space which would be very difficult to be utilized for any function, whether it be residential or office.
So do we need to specify that is for upper floors as opposed to ground floor?
We can definitely do that.
I think that's done someplace else, isn't it? No, I think that someone should probably check, but I think it may very well be that, yes, 20 feet was for first floor as well. As I know, we had a number of projects that came before us in the past years where there was parking on the first floor, and the developer had proposed some ground floor retail because it was required for the planned development zoning category, and some of the retail spaces were like 12 feet deep. Mm-hmm. And I think those kinds of occurrences fed our decision to make this number 20 feet. I guess to answer your question is my recollection is we did give it good thought.
Okay, just a question, the final one on this one is just the sort of height and density relationship between the parking and the non-parking uses. Are we concerned at all about that relationship, about what, if we're laminating, effectively the question is if we're laminating a parking structure with non-parking uses, do we want to control sort of what the relationship of the overall massing of the non-residential or non-parking uses are compared to the parking uses? And does that need to be specified? I'm looking particularly at Roman numeral 6, which is talking about the ground floor, and then looking at the entire length, but it doesn't talk about sort of, if you look at say the height of the non-parking use as a, do we care if we have a parking structure that is 100 feet tall, but only the first, 35 or 38 feet is non-parking use laminated on the front? Does it have to cover 100% of the facade, I guess is the question?
Regards to parking facilities,
I believe if there's parking on the first floor, it cannot be exposed or communicated as a function at street level. And I think most of the other requirements stipulate the ground floor retail or ground floor something that has glass. So that if you were to have a parking at a first floor, that it would have to be circumscribed with this kind of a alternative function if it's at a public way. That's my recollection. If it's an alley, that's another matter. Then I believe we just required it to be glazed or treated as a standard building wall sensitive to the rest of the building with fenestration sensitive to the building.
So I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Roman numeral 5, the parking structure must be separated from the street or open space by habitable floor space for the entire length of the facade. But it doesn't talk about height at all. So if I have a 10-story parking structure and I laminate the first 2 floors with habitable space for the entire length of the facade facing the public street, do I meet the requirement?
a commercial parking garage is considered a special use across downtown. So it goes before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then it goes before the City Council. So as a special use, conditions could be placed on it by the City Council addressing any of that questions. The commercial parking garage could be approved only if it were to not only meet this part of the downtown plan, but perhaps a condition would be to, not landscape is the correct word, but put some kind of fenestration on the front that it would block it from the view of the people on the street. So the question goes back, if they just met this, could they immediately build? No, because everywhere in the downtown is a special use, which requires specific approval by the City Council. And if City Council has concerns, and the neighbors that are going to be noticed within 500 feet of this area, the sign that's posted there, those can be addressed through that special use process.
But this section is about bonuses.
Correct.
And I read it
Apologies.
as requiring the separation for the whole facade all the way up to the top of the building.
But it doesn't say that.
And maybe we need to add those words.
I go to the formula. I go to the formula and qualifying this for a floor area bonus. Item B, number 1. A floor area bonus may be approved for qualifying habitable floor space that conceals a parking garage for buildings in RD, DT, and DC districts in accordance with the following standards. Bonus FAR equals area concealed parking facade. So if it's 4 stories of the 6 stories of a parking, let's say we have a 6-story parking garage and we're only concealing 4 of those 6 stories, it would be that calculation. So that's where that comes in. The rest of the requirements are concerning the ground floor activation and the width.
I guess that's where I'm unclear, Craig, is how do I know how much of the parking structure I must conceal to get the bonus? 2 floors, 4 floors, 6 floors of the 6-floor parking structure?
From this calculation, based on the length of the requirement of the length, it determines that you would only get a certain percentage if you only did 1 floor, an X amount if you did 2,
So it's
3.
prorated, basically?
Right.
Okay, got it, okay.
Yeah, but
All right.
but the trigger of that is also the width of the building too. You can't do 1/2 of the horizontal facade. You have to do 100% of that horizontal. For one section of a floor to count.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from a developer's perspective, what do I do on floor 6th of a 20-foot depth, leasable
Exactly.
space?
I mean, ideally,
I just don't see it happening, but,
yeah, ideally that depth might be a little bit deeper.
yeah.
But conceivably, you could do a 40-foot depth on the upper floors if you were doing residential.
Right.
But you are correct.
Okay, last one was just on page 37, the building height and profile for the downtown core district. The heights obviously probably have gotten a lot of debate. I just, maybe more of a philosophical question, but I wonder if they're tall enough. And again, this is, if we're going to do density anywhere in Evanston, it should be downtown, and it should be near the train station, in my opinion. And I just wondered, maybe someone could speak to, how the heights were essentially determined through the downtown plan process and through the generation of this new ordinance.
Through years of negotiation.
As somebody that was involved right from the very beginning that doesn't have an axe to grind in one direction or another, there are more dead horses laying around the city of Evanston than you can imagine on this particular subject. Everybody from every direction, from every profession, from every viewpoint, had a viewpoint. It was voiced, it was reviewed, modified, scaled up, scaled down, and the resulting document, the consultants that were hired by the city to review all of that and process it did a remarkable job in codifying the best possible sequences that we could have for the heights in the areas that were deemed, and that comes back to the plan that we talked about at the beginning as to where those areas came from, and all of the heights prescribed within those areas as to what was a base height, the normal permitted height, and the maximum height were beaten to death. And so your question is well taken. You can add yourself to the long list of esteemed people that have asked that question. And I think if we were to investigate that issue any further, the platinum beard that I have would probably drop out.
These are not arbitrary figures, I can assure you of that.
No, I didn't think so. I just, I'm not meaning to stir the pot, just more clarification for my own benefit.
Dennis, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just one comment. I think the relative nature of the heights in the different districts evolved from the concept of a traditional area, a transitional area, a core, and then there was a lot of debate at the P&D committee level, and I think on this body, about whether or not there should be a central core or should it be all core. But the idea was to very much get away from the somewhat potential randomness through the PD process of a very tall building being on the edge of downtown potentially in what should be a transitional zone where you're stepping down the height before you hit the residential neighborhood. So just I would add that to Andrew's commentary. This issue was debated quite a bit. The consultants very much tried to work on a proportional relationship among those districts, And I think that's what you see today. But it's certainly still being debated within the community.
It's a debate, I'm afraid, that will never end. But nevertheless, we have to deal with what we have in front of us. Anything else, Todd?
No, thank you.
Good. Any further questions from members of the commission? Mr. Steele? Okay.
Andrew has questions.
Oh, Andrew, do you have another question?
I have comments on the document that was put out on the 3rd, if you would like me to air those. Some of which Scott has got, but I'm happy to go through those, either these or a subsequent meeting, whichever is your preference. We could sit down, but I think it's important that the commission actually hears some of the points.
David, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I have some comments on the entire document as well. I wanted to find out how you wanted to proceed from an agenda standpoint tonight, how much more time you wanted to give this. Given that we aren't going to be voting on anything, I assume that the January meeting will include continued discussion?
Well, we may have to push back the January vote. I mean, it depends how many changes we have and how much discussion is anticipated. But, I mean, is it possible we have another meeting in January and then we have a vote in February, something like that? Is that?
We'll turn it around as fast as we can, yeah, certainly.
How much do you have?
My recollection is most of my comments pertain to my inability to understand how some of these requirements for like preservation and facades were determined.
Well, why don't you go ahead, David, and then we'll hear from Andrew as well. I mean, we're here to get some business done, so let's get about it.
Well, let's let Andrew proceed with his.
Okay.
No, I mean,
Thank you, I
he
appreciate it.
doesn't have to be here.
I'm referring to the December 3rd document, which was the draft, which is not the modified one that was handed out this evening. Page 5, which is Development Review, item 61118, item C1. And it states, upon the review of an applicant for a project, proposals requiring review and approval by the zoning administrator shall be pursuant to blah, blah, blah. Notify the applicant of any deficiencies or modifications necessary to perfect or complete the application. My question that I have there is the word time frame. I'm assuming that the city has regular time frames for which comments and that need to be returned so that somebody's not held out there. And whether that's the next Spark meeting or it's 1 month or whatever, but I think we owe it to the individuals that are applying that we actually, tell them a duration.
What's the time frame in here? Here. This was the old one.
Is there any place else in the zoning that we talk about durations or procedural issues like this?
1 minute, please. I'm just going to the plan development section to see if we had a time frame for review, application review. That's back to the downtown district. Yeah, that's better. Determination of completeness of application. It says, general application procedures. Within 10 working days after receipt of an application for approval described in Chapter 3, which covers plan development, special uses, major variants, minor variations, the zoning administrator shall determine whether the application is complete. If the zoning administrator determines the application is complete, he shall notify the applicant in writing that the application has been accepted for filing. If he determines it is not complete, he shall notify the applicant in writing specifying the deficiencies of the application. So it says within 10 working days, and that covers special uses, variations, and plan development. So that is part of the zoning code.
So should we be referencing that in here, wherever those clarifications are necessary?
That's in that section.
Staff, is that a reasonable time?
Well, it says the zoning administrator shall, pursuant to section 6331, notify, and that's the section I just read. So,
Okay.
Yep, so we're good.
That's fine. The next one is page 15, which is public park and open spaces. Under item 5A3, applicants who make cash contributions for specific improvements, et cetera, should this not be linked to a performance bond and the ability to the city to draw on that bond should that the developer fail to actually do that? We already have that language. I'm suggesting that anywhere that contributions in money or otherwise throughout the document always have the ability for the performance bond to be issued and a penalty to be levied should that not be met.
Maybe it should be treated like the other provisions we talked about, where it would be included in the agreement between the city and the developer, rather than have a specific provision here.
Well, why don't you take a look at that, Dominic, and then come back to us with a recommendation,
Okay.
all right?
Yep. And that was the section we were going to include the language. I think Andrew's point is, do we need a specific letter? So we'll check into that, yes.
I'm just concerned that where we're putting an onus on somebody and we're expecting some benefit from it and the benefit is not materialized, the developer or whoever has benefited from it and we have no recourse. And that's a concern. The next one is page 16, above grade parking concealed by a habitable floor space. The item is 6A4, and it says, only the facade area of the parking structure that is concealed by habitable floor space is eligible for bonus. I think, should that not be floor area rather than facade area? And if it's facade area, how were you going to calculate it? It just didn't seem to flow at that point.
Again, I think that goes back to determining what's calculable for the bonus itself. That helps with the qualifier when we were discussing how much actual bonus there would be.
It didn't make sense till I saw the formula.
Okay.
Which references facade area.
Right. I agree. The item before that, number 3, the facade of the floor space separating the parking structure from the street or open space must contain transparent windows. I seem to remember at the last meeting we had the discussion about architectural facades that were designed to allow louvers and natural ventilation, and that a developer could be put at risk in terms of his financial model if he was requiring to artificially ventilate every space. So the question that again was raised here was the percentage of floor area or facade area related to his FAR, and how high up the building that actually went. So I think all of this is connected, and I didn't see this or anything else that came out of the discussion that we had last time. Perhaps I'm missing somewhere in the text.
Again, this bonus is about habitable floor space, concealing above grade parking. And so what we're trying to do here is ensure that that facade that is being calculated for the bonus is indeed actual space that it can be habitable by some means. So those windows that must be transparent are ensuring that there's office or residential behind that facade.
Okay, that's fine. Items 7 and 8, we define it, we use the phrase habitable space in both descriptions. Should that not include the phrase such as residential dwelling units, office space, retail space, and other permitted uses? Or is that implied that it's already contained in the first paragraph, that it relates to these as well?
I feel it's implied, but I defer to the members on that.
Isn't it stipulated in the use matrix that says what uses can be located on floors, whether they be permitted or special?
I think we only specify what the primary use is, not ancillary uses. And most of these that are described up here, I would say, as ancillary rather than primary.
What do you mean in ancillary? So
If you look at the charts that are at the back that tell you what a permitted use is, those are the primary uses, but you also make reference to ancillary uses, and we discussed that at great length, that a building could have ancillary uses in it that wouldn't be the primary uses. And if you look at habitable spaces, we talk about dwellings above ground, multiple dwellings and stuff like that. We don't define habitable space in those charts, which is where I think David was coming from.
I think he's talking about what you can put on the ground floor, though.
What I was inquiring about is we have this matrix that says what are the permitted and special uses in certain categories of buildings, in certain zoning districts. So why wouldn't, and some of them stipulate that something can be only on the first floor, or cannot be on the first floor, but can be on subsequent floors. So doesn't that tell us the use that could be employed by the space that surrounds parking? And by the word habitable means that, people are going to be in there and not cows and chickens, I suppose.
Or not storage.
Storage.
What use could you see going in that would be a concern?
You could, for instance, put in like manufacturing, you could put warehouse storage. I mean, I'm just, these are classifications that you contain at the
could
back.
put storage.
Yeah.
And I think that's not the intent, so.
You could put,
Put storage,
my recollection
put
was that
mechanicals.
our intent was that it needed, from the appearance from the outside, needed to be one of being a habitable space,
Right.
not a storage of whatever, including automobiles. So if it was to be used as storage, then it would still have to have transparent windows.
Right, but we do not, I think, define in this document the phrase habitable space.
We actually do at the top, 6A, by habitable floor space such as residential dwelling units, office space, retail space, or other permitted uses are eligible for floor area bonuses, provided that they meet the following minimum standards, which would then ensure that items 7 and 8 on this refer back to paragraph A.
Right, that was my question, whether it was implicit in paragraph A and whether it was sufficient or whether it needed to be repeated. That was the question.
Well, I guess you could argue that if storage is a permitted use, then it qualifies as habitable.
Right.
Legal,
I'll leave that to legal.
The better question is, do we really want storage downtown?
As far as the language goes regarding the ground floor, well, I should say the outside space on one of these parking, above grade parking, concealed parking, ground floor versus above ground floor, or grade, the definition of habitable space should be further clarified, defined by definition, unless you include language such as including but not limited to or limited expressly to, doesn't provide as much clarity as we might otherwise hope. So we can come back with amendments to this language that makes the intent clearer.
I'd just like to say, Todd mentioned, do we really want storage there? Well, we might, if this is a condominium unit and you need to provide storage for, individuals' apartments, putting that along the perimeter of a parking area might be a very appropriate place to put it.
Yeah, it depends on the type of storage, right? If
Yeah.
A public storage facility.
Oh, no,
where it's
no, I
a
wouldn't.
giant,
Those aren't even allowed.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Larry, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I mean, you don't want to walk down the street and look in and see everybody's little storage unit from a condominium building on the street. Watch your bicycle and your, there was, at one point, we talked about some sort of a view from the street that's required in the front end or front portion of retail and office space downtown. So if we're talking about storage, we're talking about backroom storage. So you got a jewelry store and you've got stuff stored in the back. We're not talking about, I don't think we were ever considering any kind of raw storage in the front of on the street, at the street level.
So we need a definition.
Then we need to be more specific, because I could see where a case could be made, given the type of windows that are used that would not allow you to see in, particularly given the vantage point of being, if they're on the second floor, you'd probably,
Well, this
given
was
a
for
coating
ground
on the
floor.
windows, you
This
could
was-
not
this was
see
for-
the storage
No,
inside.
this was for ground floor.
Oh, for ground floor.
This was just for ground floor.
Ah, okay.
So I guess, I don't think we're worried about above the ground floor.
Right, well, the upper
Never mind.
floors say transparent windows. That's actually defined. But it doesn't say upper floors or ground floor. I think that's the definition that you need to insert. I think the phrase residential dwelling, office space, retail space, or other permitted uses is correct, because you cannot go back against the chart that you've already determined which are the permitted uses. If you have a permitted use on a space, you can't suddenly say, well, you can't take that out of the building. What you can define is whether it's ground floor or above. I think that's the area.
And if you look at 6, where it says the ground floor is required to have an active retail or other pedestrian-oriented use,
Right.
which would, eliminate your storage. And above that, I don't think we cared.
Right. But again, I think the answer has been given, that in 6A, the definition of habitable space is given, and therefore it's implied by items 7 and 8, and therefore my question is mute. Page 7, page 17 rather, item 9. I'm not sure that we have architecturally integrated on public facades.
Typo.
Speak for yourself, Andrew.
I'm glad that it was a C and not another letter. Page 18, the landmark preservation. I have some difficulty with this whole clause. I seem to remember that we had great discussion at the last meeting as to the validity of this section, and whether it was to be rewritten in its entirety. I haven't had a chance to look at the redrafted version and study it in great depth, but the question that Scott asked about whether it could be used on this building or whether it was one down the street, I think was very valid. And then I also had questions about the word funds, as to what those funds were, where they were coming from, how they were administered, whether they were city funds that we were making available for renovation and therefore granting FAR. It all seemed a little strange to me. And again, in item 4, again, how these funds were to be administered and whether there were penalty clauses related to those funds. And I'm assuming that none of these funds are actually city funds.
My recollection was the intent was, that's correct. These were funds, the developer was in effect buying additional FAR by contributing funds for the preservation of a landmark.
I just wanted to make sure that we spelled out that that's what it was, and that, you know...
Language isn't exactly clear.
The following page, 19, item 8A5, again, the performance bond and the completion of the improvements needs a little muscle related to it. And in item 6, the agreement with the City of Evanston and the agency undertaking the improvement, again, I would put in there that this agreement has to be in place before a building permit is issued. If the building permit is issued and the person doesn't, reneges on his direction, it's not holding somebody hostage, but it's making them see that we have a direction that we wish to follow. Item B, floor area bonuses. I think the classification of RD is missing. You have DT and DC districts. Why would we not want streetscape and alley improvements in the RD district?
I think that's a valid point. It's directly from the plan where it mentions DT and DC and excludes RD, but I'm not sure why you would want to exclude streetscape or alley improvements from the RD. But that's taken from the plan itself.
My recollection was, I think when we were discussing viable candidates for alley improvement, I don't think we found any or thought of any as likely occurring in RD. But that's just a recollection, so the question might be worth investigating further.
If we look at, if you exclude the word alley, and look at the word streetscape, the one major block that the farmers market fronts could sure do with streetscape improvements. And I think several other blocks in the downtown area that fall within this category could also benefit from that.
Yeah, upon recollection, it was only the alley improvements that I think that we thought were unlikely to be appropriate in those areas. But you're right, and streetscape, why not?
Can staff look at that and bring us a change?
A general question, Dominic. Mr. McGonigal has referred to various paragraphs, and you need some direction from us on this, I think. But if you find that there is merit to some of those suggestions, bring those to us. On the other hand, if you don't find that there is merit and you want to make the opposite case, tell us about that as well, okay? When we next meet, or when you have time to do this, because I know Mr. McGonigal is throwing a lot of things at you here, and
Always good things to take into consideration. So.
Okay, fine. Andrew?
I'm not trying to bamboozle.
No, I understand that. I understand that. These are all very constructive criticisms, but we have to allow Dominic time to reflect on these. And
I totally agree. I'm not asking him to make an immediate judgment, and my children don't jump to anything that I say, so I don't expect anybody else to.
Mr. Widmeyer?
Yeah, I'd just like to, one other thing about the streetscape is you're going to have to take a look at what the purview or requirement is of downtown Evanston as it relates to streetscape and how that would relate to this. Who may or may not have authority, I'm not sure how that whole thing works, but.
David? David?
I just say good point.
Okay, fine. Andrew, you're still on.
I'm nearly done. Page 22, facade improvements. Item 10A4, the phrase at the end says, must be replaced or restored where appropriate or needed. I question the phrase, or needed, is that valid? And in item 6, the storefront or street-facing side of the building must be redesigned where appropriate. I would take out when appropriate and say to be sympathetic to the structure and its surroundings. On page 23, and these are my final comments, in the main paragraph, unless a particular building is an Evanston landmark, also refer to section 333, building frontage for additional standards, projects seeking facade improvements will be reviewed jointly by the Preservation and Plan Commission. If the building is a landmark building, I can see that. Does this still refer if it's actually in a historic district or a defined district?
If the commission has purview, yes. That being the Preservation Commission. Would be my understanding.
So do we,
Even buildings that are not designated Evanston landmarks, if they're located within a landmark district, they require a certificate of appropriateness for any changes to their appearance if it's visible from the public right-of-way.
right, so it then needs to say landmark, Evanston landmark, or a historic district.
That would be correct.
Then it says underneath, a floor area bonus for qualifying projects providing funds. So the question is, where are those funds coming from and what do they do? So again, that goes back to the section on preservation. And developer seeking the additional 5% base FAR will voluntarily contribute to a facade improvement fund established by the City of Evanston. Again, we're missing a penalty clause. The word voluntarily contribute, I don't think that's what we're actually asking.
Definitely, I think we definitely need to remove voluntarily.
And I would like to thank the Commission's time in listening to me, and Dominic, and I apologize for giving you more work than I know that you're
No, it's
inundated.
good. We appreciate, and it's a public hearing, we appreciate the comment.
Yes, we do, Andrew, and you've been of tremendous help throughout this process. It's not over with yet, but I think sometime mid-May maybe we could wrap this up, but thank you very much for your comments. Tina Payden, you've signed in and you would like to say something? If you would just state your name and your address.
Yes, good evening. My name is Tina Payton, 1122 Emerson Street. I was here in front of zoning when this came up before, actually, and I still didn't get a really good answer to my question. As some of you know, my family house is the only one in the research park, which you're going to change to RD3. And on page 25, it does not allow office space on the first floor, which we have office space on the first floor currently. And my question was, I know that you all said before, if we continue to use it for office space, that will be fine. But if, in the event of fire or disaster on the house, and if I want to rebuild, can I rebuild with office space on the first floor? And I was not really given an answer for that.
Okay. We do have an answer, I think, for you. Dominic, you want to give it, or Mr. Cox? Which of you gentlemen would like to?
The direct answer to that question is anything that is a legal non-conforming use, when it is destroyed, it then must be built to conform with the zoning code as it is in its present form. So in your case, that office on the ground floor, if it were to go away, it could not be built by right to what it currently exists as.
It's kind of bogus.
It would require a special use permit. It would require approval from the city council through a special use process.
The question is, what constitutes it tearing down? What constitutes it not being enough left in order to rebuild?
More than
50%?
More than 60%.
We've had an office in that place since 1905. My great-uncle built the building, and he's had retail sales as Taggart Brothers since that time.
We have every confidence that your place will still be there 100 years from now.
Well, we hope so.
Five generations we've been there since 1899. And the city keeps coming saying, it's not going. And so what happened was my mother turned it around from East Railroad, 1869 East Railroad, put it on rollers and saved it, and they tore down our other building. Then they came again to tear it down, and my mother was there, and she was so afraid she was going to be thrown out on the street. She was 93. I was born there. My kids were born there. We've been there 5 generations, and we'll fight till the end so we can stay there.
We certainly don't want to pick a fight with you, Mrs. Bailey. Thank you for coming.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yes.
I wanted to know also, I don't know that this, I guess it is in the RD3. As far as parking, we have parking on the side of the building. I want to know, are we still having parking on the side of the building? I know at one time they were discussing removing the parking. We have parking for our residents on East Railroad. So is that going to remain there?
I'll address that question. I'm sorry. I heard that the office is retail. What, is it an office or is it retail?
Office.
What kind of office? Just simply because it may be a retail goods.
No, it's not a retail.
Okay.
It's our private office. We have rental units and we use that for our private.
Okay, good to know. Parking in the on the side of the building is the question, correct?
Yes, that's on East Railroad. You need an 11 permit, which I already bought and it's on my car already, so I'm up to date.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I have a note from somewhere in back a couple ago that we were going to make office a permitted use in RD3 since there are 3 buildings currently standing in RD3 and all 3 have office on the first floor.
They sure do, next door to us also.
We have nothing but office on the first floor currently. Now, one building is, for all intents and purposes, closed, and we have had some proposals which have not been built, which would add some retail. But currently, every building there that's in that area has office on the first floor, and 2 of the 3 are active offices.
Excuse me, if I could respond to the question about parking, if I understand it correctly, Ms. Baden. This is in a public right-of-way where you get a special permit to
Yes,
park there.
that's correct.
So that's governed by the city's parking system, and is not specifically governed by this particular set of zoning or plan. It's within the public right-of-way from that point of view. So if you currently have a structure where you're getting a sticker from the city that you're paying for every year, a permit. Right, but
Yeah, I know, but at one point, the reason I'm asking, they had discussed removing the parking. And it was in the plan, when 1881 and 1890, when 1881 Oak and 1890 Maple came up, they were talking about removing parking on Emerson Street, but they were also trying to make an allotment for larger trucks to come down East Railroad, and they were discussing removing the parking where we park currently. So I wanted to know, was that still going to be part of the plan?
and again, to clarify, the parking where you're parking currently is on East Railroad?
Yes.
Principally, yes. I will check that with you, and I don't think there's a current threat to that related to those two proposed developments. But again, it's within the realm of the city's parking system and issuing permits for people to use those spaces on East Railroad. But we can visit that by phone. It's not an issue specific to the work here.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms. Baden.
thank you.
Okay. Dominic, anything else?
I'm just clarifying, do you recall what meeting that would have been where we,
I know we've had this discussion before. I don't know if I can go back and see where I made a note on it.
I seem to recall that as well. I mean, RD3 was a very unique
there's only one
category,
category of RD3.
unique
I know.
location.
Is there anything further on amendments, text amendments, map amendments? Could we move on to the next item on the agenda? David?
Well, staff will do research on that aspect. If it was discussed that it was to be changed, we'll look into that.
Somewhere, we just certainly discussed.
Because I didn't know, I never got any answer, so I didn't know what was going to happen.
If I can write down my number.
Okay.
And the alternative, if we just want to clarify this one issue now, if the assembled members of the commission want to make a vote as to whether or not RD3 should include a ground floor use office, that could be appropriate and settle the issue, at least as far as this commission is concerned.
Well, what would be your recommendation, Dominic?
Honestly, my recommendation would be to try to go back through my notes.
Okay, well then let's do that. Let's not shoot from the hip then tonight, even though that might be perhaps more convenient.
If it's not there, let's put it on the agenda and have a vote at the next meeting.
Okay, David, did you have something?
I have questions on 22 pages of this thing. I don't know if you want me to do
Yeah,
that
let's do
now
it,
or
sure,
move
sure.
on?
I'm sorry, no. I think let's do it now. That's why we're here. Unless we want to have a special meeting, let's say the day after Christmas, or the day before Christmas.
I think that would be a Sunday, day after Christmas. Yes.
All right, first, if we can turn to, and I'll be giving you page numbers for the December 3rd document. Page 10.
Mr. Azzaro's got to leave, and so I'm wondering what's that going to do, what that will do to our quorum here, and I think we'll be okay. 1, 2, 3.
Can I just say
Four.
that it
Mr.
has nothing
Steele
to do
will
with
be here.
Mr. Galloway's comments, so I want to make that clear. Okay?
No, we'll be okay, Lenny, so you can go ahead and leave. unless you want to vote, unless you want to stick around for a vote on the election of officers.
What, do you want to change
I
the
will
agenda?
I will trust it, whatever you
Okay,
decide on the election of
I'll tell you,
officers.
let's do that. Let's do
you have a
that.
quorum
And we'll
for
take up the item 6 on the agenda is the elections of Plan Commission officers for 2011. And let me suggest we take up the matter of chair and vice chair. The committee assignments will handle it another time when everybody is here. I nominate Scott Peters to serve as chair beginning January 1 of 2011. He served on the Zoning Board of Appeals. He served on the Economic Development Board. He knows a lot about zoning. He knows about a lot about zoning law. And I think he would make an excellent chair. So I put his name into a nomination for chair. Is there a second?
I second.
Any comments? Discussion? All those in favor of, by the way, would, if
asked, I would serve.
would you serve? All right. All those in favor of having Scott Peters serve as chair beginning January 1st of 2011, chair of the Plan Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Scott, you are the next chair.
Thank you for your confidence.
The next position that we'll discuss tonight is vice chair. I also have someone to nominate, and his name is David Galloway, and he's perhaps the next most senior member of the Plan Commission. And he brings a wealth of talent and an expertise. He is an architect, and he is very familiar with zoning issues. I think he would serve very well in the capacity of a vice chair to help Scott out from time to time. So I would nominate David Galloway as a vice chair. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, David, you're now elected vice chair. Do you accept the position? Okay. Now, there's one more small matter that we have to take up tonight, and that is Larry Widmeyer. He thinks this is his last meeting, because he was expecting that we would vote on all of these amendments and send it on to the city council, but we're not going to do that, Larry. So I have the authority as chair of the Plan Commission to extend your term until such time as we get this thing off our agenda and on to the city council. So I would ask you to stick around for perhaps another couple of months.
Do you promise you'll get it done in 2011?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Good. So we can count on Larry, who has been involved in this downtown process for 4.5 or 5 years. And he knows so much. He brings a wealth of talent and expertise to this task. And Andrew, you got to stick around too, even though you're not a member of the Plan Commission. So anyway, that takes care of the election of the Planning Commission officers for 2011, and we'll take up the committee assignments next month. Thank you, gentlemen. So now we get back to David Galloway, our vice chair-elect.
Okay, if we can turn to page 10 of the December 3rd document. On item 3, at the top of the page, the entrance and exit to parking garage, blah, 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 blah. when determined feasible by the city engineer. Other locations must comply with applicable city criteria. I'm assuming that the Plan Commission has jurisdictional authority on interpreting compliance here as well. Anybody?
What's the paragraph again?
Triple I. The entrance and exit to the parking garage or loading dock is to be located off of an alley when determined feasible by the city engineer. Other locations must comply with applicable city criteria. I know that we had a number of discussions about this. I think we were reticent to throw in a specific number in regards to these entry and exit drives, because circumstances of particular developments might be better, might be such that it required more of a subjective review and approval. So my question here is that adequately, if my recollection is correct, is that adequately communicated here? Do we need additional language? We're talking about this, the city engineer determining feasibility, and then other locations must comply with applicable city criteria. But it seems to me we had expressed some subjective review here at PC. No one's recalling anything.
Well, I think you're stating that, okay, so the city engineer determined this alley is, cannot come off the alley. Therefore, the Plan Commission would have some discretion into where it could be located, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And we need a reason stated why they could reject a proposed location, correct?
Yeah.
A standard, in a sense. I think we can add a standard in that aspect to provide some foundation for, as Commissioner Saul was saying, imposing the public's welfare in that aspect. So I think staff will go and look at a standard right there.
I mean, if we've got the discretionary language as a preamble to all this, maybe that covers it.
We'll look at
But
that.
I didn't know we were even talking about that when I made that comment.
Is this back to one of those, you think the parking garage exit or the loading dock shall be located off an alley? I mean, is that, is part of this, you don't want to see it off the street?
That was our goal, to try and get them as much as possible, whenever feasible, at an alley, not penetrate a pedestrian space.
You're addressing the other locations. I think you're addressing, I hear you addressing the other locations.
Yes.
That you want discretion to look at them.
Right,
Yeah.
and we'll come up with standard to allow that.
Yeah, not the alley.
Yeah.
And then under B, it lists 3 formulas, 1, 2, and 3. Can those be cumulative? Because each one seems to talk about a different situation.
Yeah, it seems like you got it. I'm all, please.
You're good, okay. And my interpretation of this is coming from not actually being any involvement in this plan.
That's beneficial.
Right? They're not cumulative in that you have to, the structure of this is to give bonus where bonus is due. Again, it's chemistry. If somebody's only putting in 2 underground parkings, or two floors of underground parking, it's X. Beyond that is extra bonuses. If you're you can essentially add them. They're not, but you can't say that they're all going to be one equation. Is that what you're getting at?
It's a cumulative.
So in essence, yes, you will get, if you max out your 2 levels of underground parking, check 1 off, and then if you add a 3rd level, you'll get that extra floor space, and then if you add in your docks, you'll get, yes.
So the answer is yes.
But, yeah.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
But it's not to say that you can't have 1 and 3, or just 1, or 1 and 2, et cetera.
There's still a max.
Right.
Correct.
Right. That was going to be
who's
my
back?
question, was does make sure that the maximum
That was done
actually
with him.
equates to these three added together.
There's a max that covers all the
Hit the
things.
max, you hit the max.
Right.
When you hit the wall, you hit the wall.
Yeah.
Page 11, at the bottom, paragraph V, Roman numerals, lowercase v, 4. All penalties collected will contribute to a city-administered fund dedicated to supporting market adoption of green building.
I'm sorry, that is something that, through discussion with legal, has been updated. That is now reading, all penalties collected will contribute to the Sustainable Evanston Fund, which is identified in the Green Building Ordinance specifically.
Good. Yeah, because I never heard of that, so. Okay. Page 13. Paragraph 3, inclusionary housing. 3B, a floor area bonus for qualifying inclusionary housing may be approved for buildings in RD, DT, and DC districts in accordance with the following formula. Bonus floor area. Do we mean bonus floor area and not FAR?
The additional FAR which you're receiving. It's a bonus floor area ratio, I guess.
You would feel more comfortable if we added the word ratio?
I'm not sure.
It's the additional FAR, right?
Correct.
It's the same equation in which we use it in everywhere else. The nomenclature.
So we do mean floor area ratio.
Bonus FAR equals, we say
Okay.
bonus FAR equals in everywhere else. We just, for some reason, type it out here.
Okay, so it means floor, I mean, it's addressing the floor area ratio. That is its intent.
Correct. I'm looking right at the plan. It says bonus, well, it says bonus floor area. That's where we got it. In the plan, it doesn't say floor area ratio, so when we cut and paste, that's where we got it. But we will add it here.
Okay. Page 15, paragraph 5B, 1, Roman numeral 1. Floor area bonuses for financial contributions to acquire public parks or open spaces or make improvements to public parks or open spaces are to be based on the value of property within the geographic area based on the following formula, which I don't understand. So if you could explain that to me. Cost of 1 square foot of floor area equals 80% times the median cost of land per buildable square foot. I mean, I need help there.
I'm sure the consultants are the ones, no doubt.
Sorry, I just can't figure that out.
Came up with
Maybe somebody in real estate.
That's why we have consultants.
Yeah. Oh, so you guys don't know either. Well, that makes me feel better. Because
I don't know if they're specific. In reading this again, I don't know if they're discussing the land that's being acquired or the floor area bonus that's being awarded. You see what I'm saying?
oh yeah, I'm totally
Making the
confused.
calculation
I don't know
for
where to
FAR
start with
or-
that.
So we'll clarify that through our staff review.
Okay. And I think that formula comes up again somewhere, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think
I'll
it's
let
in
you know.
the plaza space. Yeah.
I think so. Andrew covered the spelling error on 17. And then on page 18, we have that same formula under paragraph 7B, Roman numeral 1.
Staff will review that as well.
Page 19. I think we already covered the possibility of including RD in paragraph 8B, at least the investigation of including RD.
Same formulas under B1.
Yes. Thank you. B1, same formula. Page 20, a minor item, and Todd can probably address this. Paragraph 9A, Roman numeral 3. At least 20% of the park or plaza area must consist of landscaping. By landscaping, I'm assuming we mean green stuff, growable things like plantings, as opposed to rock landscaping. Do we need to be more clear on that?
Yeah, that's probably a good point to talk about either paved and or impervious surface as opposed to, planted or planting area. Probably would be a good idea. That that provision, as I understand it, is trying to get some sort of open space. The other question I would have would be: is it intended to be usable open space, or is it intended to be, viewable open space, as it were?
With the intent of a plaza, per se, I don't think it would be what you would define as a usable open space, per se. But I think we may want to redefine it in permeable vegetation space instead of
I would say,
landscaping.
Planted area as opposed to paved, plaza area or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. I like that.
Because I think that's what you mean, right? It's either an above grade or in-ground planter. Right, yeah.
Stuff that needs water to live, as opposed to concrete pavers, which, don't need anything.
For interjecting with a non-legal point, but would just bring the commission's attention that if there's one public plaza that actually exists today in the city that has received plaudits, it would be the one at the old Chandler building, which, if I'm not mistaken, with the exception of a few planters, consists entirely of paved space. So I guess the question would arise whether or not an open, relatively utile space such as that has, tables and seating for the public to use, and who do use it, would, by this formula, be rendered ineligible for the bonus.
Because it has about 20% soft landscaping. The rest is hard landscaping.
Planters and tree wells and all that.
Again, I'm saying, I don't know what the math is, but I'm saying if such a space were to fall below the 20% mark, it would be ineligible.
I would say 20% goes a long way in landscaping in a plaza. I'm sure it needs
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with the 20%.
Do tree pits, are they included, even if they're graded? Like trees in grates? Is that included in the 20%? Or are these actual planters and planted area with ground cover and?
I think that's left for interpretation.
Okay.
That would go back to the definition of.
Statute can include technically in landscape.
In my interpretation is what's permeable. I would encourage the tree wells to be utilized into rain gardens or some sort of landscaping element than just a tree grate per se. But again, I think that's going to be under interpretation of what the plaza design actually indicates.
Well, my recollection, and maybe we have to go back and and do some research on this, unless we just want to vote on it. The 20% consists of growies, as I call them.
Typical architect.
Yeah.
It's a technical term.
So we'll look at that to make
Grois
sure.
messes. Well, one of the questions, and I think we even talked about this at one time, but this goes back, when I was a teenager, and we started this. process, was whether statues or other ornamental were included in the concept of landscaping a plaza. Don't know.
I think that can go into part of your discretion.
There you go.
All right, moving on, page 21. We have a formula here. And granted, I looked at this when it was very late at night. I don't understand this formula. Bonus FAR equals area of plaza or park divided by lot area times 1.0 times the base as of right FAR. Okay, let's assume we have a plaza or park which is 400 by 300 in dimensions. Oh, no, that's the lot area, excuse me. The lot area, say, is 400 by 300, and an area of 100 by 300 is the area of the plaza or the park. So,
The plaza was what?
400 by 300.
Is the lot.
100 by 300 is the open space.
Right. So that the ratio or fraction there would be 3,000 over 12,000, or 3/12. 3/12 times 1.
25%.
Oh, I see, it would be, okay. Yeah,
And you'd probably max
Okay.
out right there.
that works.
Basically, it'd be a quarter of the additional bonus.
Yep, it works, never mind.
Why is the 1 in that formula?
Yeah, that's where I became confused. Right, why are we multiplying times 1? Why can't it just be the fraction times the FAR?
That's taken from the plan directly, so,
Yeah?
yep.
Who was the consultant on this plan?
We only paid him $250,000. What do you want, Larry?
Part of the test to get into graduate school,
Yeah, I know.
if you catch the one.
Kidding.
Yeah, because that's what threw me, because I thought, well, maybe you're supposed to add it to the 1. Anyway,
It's meaningless.
okay.
So we can check into that and,
Can we just say 25%?
yeah. Or we can just say the
The
fraction.
fraction.
The fraction
The
times
resulting
base.
fraction times
Yeah.
the FAR.
Yeah, the 1.0 is meaningless.
Can we do bonuses for dummies here?
Page 22, paragraph, first sentence, I guess it is, 10A, Roman numeral X, 10. Awnings, marquees, or canopies must be replaced? I'm circled the word must.
It may have been a correction we didn't get when appropriate.
Appropriate was supposed to be in there.
Okay, good.
It might be nice if you could have some standard there that's a little more specific, also in Roman numeral 4.
Yes, correct.
When appropriate doesn't communicate much.
We'll work on a standard. As you recall, this is this is the public benefit that was created by the subdivision of the, so we have a purview to come up with a standard here.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where I think the discretionary review of the Plan Commission really becomes quite important. As Larry mentioned, something as developer can come in and say, I'm throwing paint and a cornice on this building, I need 10% increase on my FAR. Continuing on the next page, 23, similar language at Roman numeral 13 at the top of the page, outdoor public art must be incorporated.
I believe the intent here might be that when outdoor public art is incorporated, it shall be subject to conditions by the Plan and Preservation Commissions.
That would make sense.
That would make sense.
I mean, if you're lot line to lot line, where are you going to put public art?
Didn't we also discuss the art commission as well?
Yeah, we would be doing a great disservice and creating a incredible mistake if they were not incorporated. Public Art Committee. I have a question. Let's see, paragraph B, Roman numeral 1. Reading that a floor area bonus for qualifying projects providing funds for facade improvements may be approved for buildings in the RDDT and DC districts in accordance with the following formula, another formula. For additional 1% of base FAR, the contribution to the facade improvement fund is 2% of the total of the construction fee. What does the construction fee mean? 2% of the total construction cost of improving the facade?
Of the whole project.
Of the, of what?
This is a public benefit bonus for a structure in which somebody is proposing to build a structure that costs $2 million. And so the for an additional 1%, you must donate 2% of $2 million to the preservation fund.
Okay, I think that needs to be clear, that it's a 2% of the total cost of the proposed project.
I think you need to be careful because I do a lot of budgets. What my project cost is not my construction cost. And, you know, there's a 35-40% difference between my project cost and my construction cost. And trying to get a project cost out of a developer, you'll never do. Construction cost relates to the number that is publicly addressable on the final occupancy certificate. That's the number that is about, that's in the public domain. And I would suggest that's probably the number, and you need to tie it to that.
This is the fee for facade, the construction cost for facade improvements.
The whole project,
I think the subcommittee meant the whole project.
2% for a 2% contribution of the construction cost of the proposed project, the developer would get an additional 1% increase of the base FAR. Is that right?
I think it needs to be clarified because if you're talking about a proposed construction budget versus an actual construction cost, you know, if it's proposed to cost $2 million and it ends up costing $3 million, you know, what are we asking for? Are we?
That's why I say related to the final occupancy.
To the construction.
Yeah.
Because that amount of money, you have to pay the difference between your building permit fee based upon your final cost.
Yeah.
So that's the one that's actually out there in the public domain.
Yeah, how does the city know what the final cost is? Yeah.
You have to have a sworn statement.
Yeah,
That's because that's what's based off the building fees.
right.
Why is this in the facade section? If it's not about facades.
But it is, the money's going for the improvement of a facade, isn't it?
Okay,
The 2% contribution is into the facade fund that will also help
okay.
fund
I
other
understand.
projects throughout the downtown area.
Before you get off that, Andrew was correct on the public art. In November, we made a comment that the role of the Art Council should be considered in that, in any public art that was included.
Okay, I'm glad you brought the question up about funds and the money going into a public facade fund, because that goes back to the preservation clause, I think the one before this, which was who administers that fund, what does the fund mean, and where does it go? That was one of the questions that I raised, and whether we want to be in that position.
I don't believe, I could be mistaken, I don't believe such a fund does exist at present. However, the city does have a facade improvement program, and we've actually had a great deal of participation of late in that, wherein the city uses funds it has available to it, TIF funds when the project is in a TIF district, and other economic development funds in order to help fund 50% of facade improvements for local businesses. The city, it could be defined either here or elsewhere that the city would create a dedicated fund for such projects, and this could be a feeder stream for that fund.
And we'll get Ken to write up that language.
Thank you, Ken.
I mean, Heckey's is getting $5,000 CDBG fund to improve his establishment there on the outside, I know.
Well worth it.
Page 27. At the second paragraph from the bottom. And let's see, we're talking about building height and profile. And this is in the RD1, RD2, and RD3 districts, which are presently predominantly multifamily residential, mostly vintage buildings. Usually most of them, the existing buildings in those areas are in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 stories in height. Excuse me. And I circled the word parapets in the fourth line. Height includes all stories regardless of whether they are used to provide parking or not. Architectural features, rooftop accessory structures, or mechanical equipment such as heating and ventilation equipment, antennas and elevators are not counted in building height, nor are parapets or architectural features that are designed to screen such equipment. If I agree with that, if those parapets that they're referring to are not part of the exterior wall, if they are set back from the exterior wall.
You're trying to prevent 10-foot tall parapets?
Yeah, at the perimeter of the building. I just raised that as a question because it hadn't occurred to me before. I mean, if we're talking about it, if we're talking about a new building, I don't think we would want the 10-foot screen wall to be in the same plane as the exterior wall of the building.
I agree. I would recommend that we strike parapets from that and just say nor are or other architectural features that are designed to screen such equipment.
Yeah, I think that would
because I don't think parapets actually adds anything to that conversation.
Right, right. That would work for me.
Or any.
And we'll make that throughout because that is standard language in the other two sections. So.
Okay. Page 30, talking about approved and special uses in the DT, the transition districts.
30?
Page 30, this is on the December 3rd document.
Okay.
Let's see, why did I circle? Dwellings multifamily. P.
Uh-huh.
Do you recall that, Larry? Does that make sense? And home occupation.
Well, home occupation we did move into this area because just of all the condos we'll have people to use them as offices, small for law firms or the whatnot. That's the official term.
Okay. And then moving down to the last, retail goods establishment and retail services establishment. The difference there is that one is selling goods and one's selling services, right?
Correct. One it would be a yoga instructor, the other would be vitamin supplements seller.
Okay.
Very specific.
And one of the issues with retail services were banks. Whether we allowed banks, for example.
Right.
And we do, because in here, the bank is qualified as a financial institution, which we have as permitted use as well.
Don't worry. Okay, then on page 31, it's been a long time since we visited this, but I was curious that the maximum building height for DT1 and DT2 were so close. And I don't recall, I have no recollection of how we got there or how we made that decision, but it just was a curiosity to me, because the difference of 4 feet isn't going to probably make much of a difference whether it's a 3 or 4 story or building.
I would imagine that was a negotiated item during the planning process.
Council.
Council.
I was told we had negotiated this over the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
I'm sure we could pull out the transcripts if
I think
you.
you'll find council added, because that's the area on Davis.
Correct.
I think you'll find council gave them a little more for,
It may have been, DT is 38 feet, and the areas replacing is 42 feet. The original the original downtown 2, which is current. So I would imagine the DT2 was allowed a permitted by right height equal to what exists now, which is 42 feet. So.
That sounds good enough. Okay. Moving to the third paragraph from the bottom, rooftop screening or enclosures for mechanical equipment may not exceed 20 feet in height. We're talking about a 3 or 4 story building with a 20-foot high screen?
And this is where I think somewhere Seth Freeman is.
Mr. Freeman and all of us had that conversation about 2 months ago in discussing that this also covers buildings that will qualify for bonuses. And in these areas, your bonus structure is, what's the max height in DT2?
Max height in DT2 is 42 feet.
With bonus?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. With bonus, it is.
Should be right there. You're looking at 88 feet in height for max bonus in DT2, 60 feet in DT1.
Okay.
Also, a developer, I don't think, would actually build a 20-foot tall screening on a 3-story structure. If they are, then I think their priorities in development are opposite.
Okay,
And
well, your
that
explanation about the fact that this could be 6 or 8 stories.
We have to write legislation that keeps those bonuses in mind as well.
Very good. Page 34, categories of uses. An industrial service establishment is at the bottom. What is an industrial service establishment?
Remember that downtown, that DC2 area comes from, arises from the former research park area. So that is why it's included. But let me find the specific definition for industrial service establishment. Industrial service establishment is a building, property, or activity of which the principal use or purpose is the provision of industrial-oriented services directly to the industrial use establishment. this term shall include, but will not be limited to, tool shops, machine repair and service shops, blade sharpening shops, and similar establishments. Industrial service establishments shall not include any use or other type of establishment that is otherwise listed specifically in a zoning districts as a permitted or special use. The reason, again, that was listed in the RP, and that's why it was kept.
I have a hard time seeing a blade sharpener in the research park. Really?
That older historic structure.
Right,
Yeah.
we have carpenter shops, locksmith shops, electrical shops, paint shops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So those functions are there and have been for a long, long time.
Oh, you're talking about the
910
building.
University Place.
Yep, okay.
And then it was,
Right. Okay.
originally, we had it as a not existing use as in DC1 and DC3. However, as zoning administrator Bill Dungley pointed out, the continuity of the whole downtown core, we couldn't have one area permitted and then just not even allowed in the other two. So that's why it's a special use in those other two districts. It's not going to expand because the city council would be like, I just don't see that, so.
Okay. Page 35, we have pharmaceutical manufacturing as a permitted use in DC2.
Again, that's a research park
That's the research part.
issue.
So you're sharpening knives and making drugs. Like, cool.
It's a flexible area.
Just add the alcohol.
Creative class designation,
Where do the liquor stores go? Are those included?
Yeah.
Howard Street, south.
And Skokie.
Okay, I'll pass on that one. Page 37. I don't have a recollection of how the maximum gross floor area came about. But I'm trusting that this is what actually happened. It just seemed rather odd to me that the first through fourth floors, well, no, first before 100%, sure, that makes sense, but then from the 5th to the 15th being cut back all the way to 65%, and the 16th to 25th being cut back 50%.
Those are the setbacks.
Those are all the setbacks.
Wedding cake zoning.
Okay. Paragraph D2, entrances. Buildings must have a public entrance facing the street and sidewalk. Building entrances must occur at a rate of at least one entrance per 50 feet of frontage.
This is one that slipped through. I think Craig can address this. You
Yeah.
did speak to it, so.
We spoke about this a while back,
Yeah,
right?
2 months ago, and
Yeah.
it didn't get changed. Staff will do a sit down and make sure every nuance is here. Thanks for making sure.
Okay.
That's
And then I'm not sure if I have a problem with this or not. Paragraph D4 at the bottom of the page, facade articulation. Facades exceeding 50 feet in width must be vertically divided into bays or other segments no more than 30 feet in width.
Bless you.
I understand what this is going for,
Yeah.
but I'm a little reticent to prescribe something specific. So we might want to think about that. I don't know what other people...
Would it be better for a percentage potentially, or?
Here again, I think that's something that's quite subjective. You know, depending on the context, depending on the design of the building, what kind of articulation is most appropriate can be based on all sorts of factors which we can't really delineate or articulate, I don't think, verbally.
Yeah, what defines a bay? That's the one that I always.
Why don't you define, just say, divided into bays or segments, and take out the rest of it?
Yeah, we didn't want to give architects too much latitude here.
I think something like Andrew suggested would be preferable to the prescribed thing here, because that...
Taking out So the trigger is 50 feet, but we don't need to have the 30-foot segment in there.
Say vertically divided into bays or segments and then take out.
So you're saying we're going to trust architects to know our intent?
Well, I hope so.
Well, let's think about, I guess it was Osco, where you had a facade that must have been 150 feet. So that would give you 2 divisions.
No, still leave the 50 feet. Leave the 50 feet, and say it has to be that bay.
But it doesn't say for each 50 feet.
It should say for each 50.
Dave, does that work for you? If we do it with no standards, then it
Is your mic on, sir?
has not much meaning.
Mr. Peters, can you make sure you turn on your mic? Thank you.
If we do it with no standards, then it has no meaning. Are you thinking of a division at least every 50 feet?
No. No, I'm just very uncomfortable prescribing how a facade of a certain length must be articulated. I think in my mind, I think I would prefer to see some kind of language that says facades of 50 feet or more should be articulated in a manner that that increases their pedestrian scale and articulates their facade, and leave it. I don't know. Maybe we want to think about this.
I'll do a staff research on this over the Christmas break and propose a change to this specific section.
The only problem
Because
is,
you can't, I mean, the whole design,
I agree
the whole
with you.
design of a wall of a building is going to be stipulated by this paragraph, or this sentence, which
Right,
is
there's-
absurd.
there's the push-pull
We're
of-
striving for a certain thing to happen, but I don't think we want to prescribe it. That's insulting.
There's the push-pull of the architect's desire and our desire to ensure that it's not a 30 or 45-foot blank wall.
Say they must be articulated in order to increase its semblance of scale.
now,
Right, but I want to take the
who's to determine that
subjectivity.
This is the same discretionary stuff we're talking about when it comes to the facades and the landmarks and so
You'll
forth.
bring something to
I
our
think
next
there's a more
meeting.
elegant way of saying this.
I mean, this
Materials, yeah.
now gets down, when you start doing that, one of the reason we did this was to try to get away from an appearance review committee, per se. When you start doing that, now you're getting yourself into an appearance review committee.
We turn
so
into
that
an
they
appearance
de- So that they decide.
But I would also argue, I don't think we are, but there are many people that are fearful that we aren't going to be able to make certain aesthetic judgments on some of these projects. So I would argue that to a certain extent, I think the public wants us to be charged.
Well, the public themselves want to. They don't want us to. And that, in part, is the difference.
That's a good observation.
I just disagree. I think it's a little, not quite as cynical as that, I guess.
How many of these did you sit through?
Well, they would like to do it, sure, but there are those that would like us to be able to, exercise some discretion when it comes to the design of some of these structures. If I had, I would almost rather not have anything in here about facade articulation as opposed to have something that stipulates.
I will come back with a recommendation.
But let's think about that.
First of all, I think that it's important in a form-based code such as this to have a comment about facade articulation, because that's one of the most important aspects of a form-based code, is to both encourage and provide guidance as to what is appropriate. Second, I will do some research and provide new language that would be appropriate to achieve both standards.
Okay, thanks.
How about something as nebulous as this, that facades exceeding 50 feet in width must exhibit sensible vertical articulation? I mean, it's pretty open-ended, but nevertheless, I think you sort of convey the idea.
And what is sensible to you?
Well, I know. You
As
can't
determined
define,
by the Plan Commission.
you can't define everything.
That's all I have. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Thank you, Commissioner
helpful.
Galloway.
And any other changes we'd like to talk about before we turn it over to Craig on our next agenda item, which is an update on the 2030 plan? Dominic, at our next meeting, are you going to have a log of these?
Oh, yeah, it's in the back.
It's going to be, I know you have that, but I mean, we covered a lot of ground tonight, and the next log, I suspect, is going to be 5 pages long.
But it will be added on to that. So we had that
Yeah.
log that went from zoning committee.
Yeah.
We're starting one now, that's from plan commission, so first batch, second batch in there.
Okay.
And then with the colleagues here, ensuring that we have all the changes that we talked about.
Okay, very good. Craig?
Our first agenda item to discuss actually is Plan Commission meetings for 2011.
Oh,
Attached in your
sorry
memo-
about that.
Attached in your packet was a quick
Right.
memo with proposed meeting times. These have already been scheduled on the calendar, but I just wanted to make sure that we're not running into anything. I have checked it with both city holidays, the Jewish calendar, and other appropriate religious holidays as well, to make sure that we're not running into anything. And as far as I could tell, we're not.
It's good enough for me. Anybody have a problem with any of the dates that we've set aside for meetings in 2011? Okay, next item.
Anniversaries, birthdays.
No.
Okay, let's move on. Update at 2030.
Commissioner Peters and I have begun a series of interviews with city staff. Commissioner Peters will probably be more than willing to give a little update on his side. Our next meeting is Wednesday after the Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission. What we would like to achieve at that point is to solidify the working group, solidify its numbers, and move forward from there, because end of February is coming really quickly, and that's when we've scheduled in our scope of work to start public visioning sessions for the comprehensive plan. So we have a lot of items to get underway in the next 2 months. So if you are interested in being part of that working group, please attend Wednesday. I promise to be there. I have nothing else.
Coming Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
Yes. I sent out an email.
It's after the
Zoning committee.
Zoning Committee of the Plan Commission, which a lot of you are on anyways.
It would be nice if people would look at the 2 memos from Craig, table of contents and items needing consideration, I think you call it priorities,
Priority issues.
to see if there are things missing or things that need to be added. We tried to do that at the last meeting, but when the meeting before was canceled, people didn't come. So we'll try it again.
So what time will that start, Craig?
About 7:45. I know it's a little bit late, but until we can find a bit more appropriate time to host these meetings. We're going to try to keep you guys not here every night of the week.
And Todd, it occurs to me that you're the co-chair of the 2030 plan, so now that Mr. Peters is the chair, you may have an expanded role, or perhaps beyond what you had anticipated.
Right.
Might be an opening there for you.
Scott and I met this morning, and
What time is the zoning committee? 7?
7, I think.
So speak briefly at your zoning committee meeting.
So you expect the 2030 meeting to commence about what time, 7:15? 7:30?
Well, if the zoning committee meets at 7, is that right? Or is
Yeah.
it 6:30?
7.
then it'll be 7:45
I
or
think
so.
there's 2 referrals from the council.
Okay, 7:45, you think?
Yeah, you have 2 agenda items. One is a doggy daycare zoning legislation referral,
Okay.
and the other is something of that sort. I think home office or something like that.
Okay, any committee reports?
I do have one report. I wrote in my email, we do have an additional Plan Commission member starting. She couldn't be here today, but she will be at the subcommittee of the comprehensive plan.
Okay, anything else?
What do you know about her? Profession?
She's a professor at Northwestern, and she has a doctorate in economics. So, seems very well educated.
Good, good. Okay, anything else, gentlemen? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.